can hold, no fear can bind. We speak the real, leave the fake behind. A call to arms, a rebel's tune. The signal's strong, we're breaking through. God TV Radio, the Brett Keane Show. Lighting up the dark, let the whole world know. God TV Radio, the Brett Keane Show. Truth is on the mic, feel the power grow.
Tongues of venom, weaving lies, spinning webs beneath blood-red skies. Deceit their crown, their hearts of stone. Betrayers kneel on a self-for throne. No mercy waits, no truth to save. Their twisted words dig their own grave. Flames rise high, the judgment calls the liars. Empire crumbles and falls. Burn in the fires of hell, they scream. Annihilation tears their dream. No escape from the molten fires. Burn their souls to ash, descend. Deceivers meet their final end. Falsehoods carved in a world of pain. Their silver tongues now bound in chains. The abyss yawns, it claims their fate. No lies can flee its burning hate. Their masks dissolve in the crimson glow. The truth they mocked now waits their soul. Flames rise high, the judgment calls the liars. Empire crumbles and fires. Empire crumbles and fires. In the fires of hell they scream. Annihilation tears their dream. No escape from the molten fire. Their souls to ash descend. Deceivers meet their final end. Screams echo through the endless night. No savior comes to grant them light. Their words once sharp, now turn to dust. Betrayed by lies, their bones combust. Oblivion's grip holds them tight. Erased forever from the light. Liars fall into the void, the flames fall. Annihilate, eradicate. No trace remains of their deceitful fate. Burn in the fires of hell they scream. Annihilation tears their dream. No escape from the molten fire. Burn their souls to ash, descend. Deceivers meet their final end. The lies to keep. No one can save them from the free. Annihilated forever gone. The liar is dead and done.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brett Keane from GodTvRadio. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Let's put Smokey on the big screen along with Prophet Daniel. What's going on, guys? Are you ready for some awesome questions? And what have you guys been up to?
Hey, how are you, Brad? Nice seeing you for the second time in a day. How are you, Smokey?
What do you guys think of that intro? Was that me?
That was good. I liked it. It was good.
Oh, yeah, the songs were pretty good.
I'm going to
you.
share this on Discord just real quick to let everyone know, remind them, because you tell them, days before, and, life happens, they forget. So I'm going to pop it in here real quick.
I hear you. They might be looking for the butt cream I keep hearing about.
Yeah, they've been playing some very, very cringy antics over there in the Free Grace universe. The way their brains work really does just shock the heck out of me. So,
Well, while he's doing that with Discord, Prophet Daniel, how did you feel about your conversation earlier with Brother Maverick? It seemed like it was a good discussion.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. It was a good discussion. What did you feel about it?
I thought it was enjoyable. It was what I expected. Everybody was going to talk, be respectful and cool, and there was going to be a little bit of intensity.
Hmm. So do you think now I'm ready to debate David Wood?
We'll have to work on it, but I think there's some potential for sure.
So, sorry, what did you say?
I said there's definitely some potential, but David
Oh,
Woods
there
is
is.
a different kind of animal, so I don't know. Hell, he'd make me nervous.
I see you have a debate coming up on Standing for Truth's channel, Daniel, against Praise I Am. It's definitely
Yeah.
about the lowest hanging fruit you can possibly reach on the Christian tree. So you're definitely starting at the bottom rung. I wanted to let you know you're kind of, if you've ever played RPGs, before you get to the boss, you have all the little gremlins and goblins and stuff. Praise is like one of them. So it's just, the quick slashes. And it's unfortunate too, because I'm Christian, but Praise is such an incompetent nonce. I think that it's just going to be a ridiculous blowout. You'll probably show him quite a few things in that, just like how Spider, probably one of the dumbest atheists I've ever come across, managed to completely own Praise I Am as well and wreck him. So best of luck to that. Kind of, I guess that's your premiere debut on the Standing for Truth channel, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's your first debate over there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, best of luck to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm basically looking for any opportunity to put myself out there, so I'll take everything that comes my way.
That's where I was at 6 years ago, where I would just basically show up and debate absolutely anything, including veganism. I got some following from anti-vegans there for a hot minute, even though I wasn't really in the mode to be necessarily anti-vegan. Everyone can choose their own diets for themselves, but I got thrown into some of those debates and even got a bit of a following just off of the anti-vegan crowd. Someday I'll tell you about Smokey's fully vegan pig farm, and that'll be an interesting thing. They didn't want to talk to me after that much at all. So,
Right.
well, where do we go from here, Brett?
Well, just waiting for you to post the link and giving you guys an
Oh, I
opportunity.
did. Yeah, we're good. Yep, I posted it up. So if anyone's out there, they should be popping in.
I guess the best way to start a video or show like this is to basically have you guys define God's attributes, or at least how you interpret them, such as omniscience, omnipresence, all that, for the audience or people who will hear it down the road.
Okay, sure. Do you want me to start or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So just so everyone's aware, kind of my operational perspective is going to be from around about 30 plus years of study of Christian theology and multi-faith theology, usually with a fixation on logic and philosophy, and also an understanding of church history, biblical hermeneutics, philosophical interpretation, metaethics, metaphysics in terms of regards to God's relationship to reality. I spent a lot of time looking into this because I am one of those people who these type of things left in the milieu of confusion or being unanswered in my mind was problematic. So I dedicated a lot of time not to what I would say a specific conventional structured type of study, but to learn specifically what I felt was essential enough to justify my epistemology that I was coming to correct beliefs. And when it comes to the nature of God, just to begin from there, so you guys know I'm operating from a Molinist perspective. Most people are familiar with Calvinism, Arminianism, maybe some people even open theism. I am none of those. I am a Molinist, which is a mildly different category. It lines a little bit closer to Arminianism, and some people would argue is compatible. with Arminianism and their viewpoint of the preservation of the existence of mankind's free will. So in terms of God's sovereignty from this perspective that I'm operating from, or God's attributes, I would take, of course, the understanding that he is all of those things that you typically hear the omnis, omnipresent, omniscient, omniscient, all-knowing, and of course omnipotent, all-powerful. However, the way that many people define these terms is philosophically inept. Most of the time, these terms are usually adopted into the realm of absolute logical absurdity. And that's not the thing we're talking about when we mean all-powerful or all-knowing. Particularly all-powerful is the one that is most abused. Generally, every apologetic is just fine with a general kind of absolutist idea of all-knowing, but different versions of the faith will take that to mean different things. And just to give you an example, a Calvinist believes that generally, and this, there's brands of Calvinism, but in general, a Calvinist will believe that the universe is very deterministic. This means that there is only one possible reality, therefore making that reality basically a necessary reality or an essential reality. It's the only reality that possibly can be. So the idea of God having middle knowledge, where he could know other possible realities, is an incoherent factor in their theology. They don't have a place for middle knowledge in their viewpoint. And this is how a Calvinist would approach these things very different from me, because a Calvinist would be much more hyper-deterministic in terms of their view, even fatalistic in some regards. So I do adopt all of the traditional omni qualities, but they would need clarification. They're not the general low-thinking, low IQ, absolutism type of definitions that people tend to give. Everyone's free will, and I do believe this includes God, is tied to their nature. We as human beings cannot make decisions that are outside of our nature. As an example, I can't walk outside and simply decide to sprout wings and fly and take on the nature of a bird. There's a limit of range and scope into my free will exercises that are limited by my nature. God is the same way. Since God is good, the standard of good, that which is good, all of his actions that flow must necessarily be good. This is him acting within the range of his nature. And I can take this from a different angle, where essentially whatever God would do would be good anyway, because he's the only objective standard that exists. So anyone arguing from any side point about that would have to argue purely from a subjective framework, and it's a completely fallacious argument where you start. It's actually nonsensical. I'm surprised so many people entertain it by attempting to use subjective cultural norms and morality to attack the existence of God. Anyway, I'm sidetracking a bit. So to basically nail it down, I accept all of the omni qualities, with the exception that I wouldn't allow low-thinking, non-theological minds to come up with the definitions. I would use actual theological, biblically backed definitions. So I'll yield with that.
Very good. Your thoughts, Prophet Daniel? How would you describe the attributes of God?
Hey, yeah, thank you for the overview, Smokey. I mean, the way I would define these qualities of God: omniscience, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. As a human being, I think God has a relationship with me, and God has introduced to me with these qualities, and those qualities are to provide me or equip me with the understanding of how God would operate with me in this relationship. And outside of this relationship, God is much more beyond my comprehension. And what would that entail in is his overarching creation, in which I find myself as a element or a creature. But God is so much more than he would obviously communicate to me. So whatever he would communicate to me would apply to me, but whatever he hasn't really communicated to me, is where I would not be able to comprehend him, right? So when he communicates to me his qualities of omniscience, the way I would understand that is God knows things or about things that exist. God is aware of everything that exists, basically. God knows everything. Things that we as human beings still cannot see, for example, or cannot perceive, or have not developed the means into knowing things. Because they exist, God already knows them, and He's not in any way prevented from knowing things that exist out there. So that's how I would understand omniscience. I would not necessarily understand omniscience to mean all future possibilities or all future actualities, for example. So I would not necessarily understand omniscience to include future, although God does inform me about some of the future things that He would go on to do. But I would not necessarily understand omniscience to mean everything that I would do in the future, that God is already aware of those actualities. So I would not necessarily argue omniscience to include that knowledge. And omnipotence is, I would understand again as omnipotence to be like God is capable of um, controlling everything that would have a relationship with me, kind of thing. Like, how would I say this is, any aspect which would go on to bring about some form of determinism in human life. God is in control of it. So even though human beings have free will, um, God is ultimately in charge of allowing certain outcomes to occur. The determinism right there being God has the capability in His omnipotency to cause a divine intervention, like the miracles, for example. God intervened during Moses' exodus, upsetting matters for Pharaoh. And God also intervenes with His heavens forces to alter the course of the battles. So God is an omnipotent God, um, but that does not mean that out of my own free will and volition, I'm normally prevented to doing certain things, unless God makes this divine intervention to stop my volition, right? So that's how I would understand omnipotence of Almighty God. And omnibenevolence is again, it's not like a permanent thing or a permanent promise. Omnibenevolence is, of course, uh, uh, God has given me this life. He's been benevolent to me, which I enjoy, like, where I'm nourished, cherished, even though I may be not really thanking God enough, but God just does it out of His own grace that He gives or bestows life. And the determinism right there would be that, as I understand from the theology in the Quran, is if I am becoming aware of the truth uh, to a degree that I'm satisfied in knowing the truth, but I elect to disbelieve in the truth, then God would cease His benevolence towards me. So these are the qualities of God, the three essential qualities, the God qualities. That this is how I relate to them, and yeah. So that's my take.
We got a couple of different attributes as well. I'm sure you both have probably heard it. The timelessness, eternity, existing outside of time and space, not bound by linear progression. immutability, unchanging in essence or character. And one last one, goodness, often described as the very source of moral perfection and love. Is this your views?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the way I understand this is God is for sure timeless. I mean, there's no question about that. Um, I mean, you c- God is not captured in the linear progression of time. His being is not captured there. But the way uh, I would I would say is God does interact in time, although he is not bound by it. He does perform in time, and he's performed a number of different things. He's created lots of things and us, and also has a dynamic relationship with us in which he sort of interacts with us in a dynamic way. God does interact in time. That does not curtail his timelessness. And yeah, that's my understanding of his timelessness.
Um, I guess I could kind of springboard off of that. And I'm actually glad to hear you say that, but Daniel, it's kind of a little bit of a meeting of the minds there right away. In terms of God's being completely detached or separate from any idea of chronology, certainly linear chronology, or any other type of potentially higher dimensional chronology. He is timeless. This is essential even for God to be philosophically coherent, for the universe to even be in existence at all. I believe this is basically an essential proof to the existence of God. However, and this is where, again, to focus on the idea where, like, what exactly is his function, in terms of how his thoughts function, actions, things like that. There are classical theology takes where, like, say, for instance, Thomistic philosophy and theology is the idea that God is basically pure action. He just is action. We see, because when you have the idea that the divine is free of any kind of chronology, then the action itself is eternal. So there was no point in time where God had not decided to create creation, because he's timeless. So there's no progression of thought. There is the mind of God in its seemingly incredible complexity that is able to pull together all facts of all possible realities of all possible times and coalesce it together in singularity. Now, we can't imagine how this could possibly function. Our brains, the way that we relate to reality, is very linear, it's progressive, and to even attempt to wrap our brains around the type of thinking that God would be having doesn't mean it's not true. Our inability to grasp in full aspects of his nature is to be expected for a transcendental entity. Anyone that would claim that they have a God that is perfectly definable and describable and logical by the level of finite three-dimensional logic and classical mechanics, I'm going to think you have a fake God. You have a God that's made of something. You have a God that's inside reality, not outside reality. This is why the Christian God claim, despite the squawking of all the atheists, and this is, again, I don't want to get down this road, but I'd love to do a stream even sometime talking about why the Pascal's wager is one of the best arguments if the atheists were ever actually honest about how other religions compare to Christianity in terms of what the God claim actually is. Our God claim makes sense. Okay? We're talking about an entity that is the source of all reality, all facts, all truths, all laws of logic, laws of physics, the function of the universe. All these transcendental constants that permeate our reality cannot be constants of their own, all in singularity. They all have to be grounded somewhere because they all mesh with each other. They all fit together with each other. And to adopt the idea that you have a plurality of constants out there that just so happen at near random to come together to be coherent in reality is a wild speculation, far more wild than the speculation that there is a God that grounds and reasons all facts and transcendentals. This is also why I think the tag argument is generally powerful. It's not particularly convincing because people suppress the knowledge and their unrighteousness, so they don't always come to terms with it. But I do think it's coherent, and if anyone's being objective and rational and honest, that they will glob onto that. So God cannot have any type of chronology to him. And it doesn't matter if you don't like it because you can't wrap your brain around it. It's just how it is. So when we are defining God or talking about God, we should be cautious that we're not doing anything, we're attaching any kind of chronology to him. We do not want to do anything where we are taking part of creation and saying God is just like that. It's blasphemy. In Islam, it's reprobate blasphemy. It's the unforgivable sin called shirk. Once you compare and equivocate part of Allah's creation along with him, it's over for you. You're going to go to hell where Allah does horrible things with your nether regions, apparently, or something, if you believe the hadith. That's up to you. But in any case, you have to be conscientious that when we're describing God, there are going to be certain components of him that we can only reference analogically at best. You can only say God's kind of like this. He's kind of like this thing over there. He's kind of like this idea. We cannot correlate a direct one-to-one ratio because God himself by nature is transcendental. And to think you're going to drag him down to our level and make him perfectly easily understandable and definable in his transcendental nature with our finite minds and finite limitations, that's absurdity. That's a fool's errand. So with that, I'll yield.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see some of the rationale that you just laid out have got some problems, especially with the decisions that you attribute to God has always been timeless, and that really takes away the ability of God to articulate a new thing or a new idea, for example, because those articulations are basically prompted or requested by an agent who's human in this case, for example. So human pleads to God, brings new matters to the attention of God, beseeches God. So for God to have decided those, made those decisions in a timeless fashion, and then manifest them through the instantiation of his timelessness decision into a speech, kind of builds the fatality model or the Calvinistic model again in making those ideas of God or decisions of God as potent of determinism, which basically caused the actualities with these people, beings with free will, to imitate towards complying towards those decisions that were previously made already with God. So it does gravitate towards a Calvinistic, fatalistic, deterministic model eventually, because if God cannot speak anew, then God is not free or, say, dynamic, which limits, in a way, his omnipotence. The premise that God should know these things in a timeless fashion and should have made those decisions in a timeless fashion kind of backfires on God's omnipotence not to have a dynamic volition with his beings who are capable of free will. Otherwise, the real capability of free will is sort of diminished if God has made timeless decisions in favor of those agents who have or possess this free will, for example. So it's kind of the rationale that you were trying to bring with the premise that our limitations, we can never understand God, and we should not insist in understanding or comprehending God. I do understand when I laid out my own premise that in relation to how God speaks to us, we fathom or comprehend Him in that lens. But outside of it, we don't really know the capability, the full capabilities, or the full suite of capabilities of Almighty God. We can only make sense of him in the way he communicates to us, in the way that he has communicated to us, like we see in also in the Bible. We see God gives promises and makes covenant and calls them as everlasting, but we also see God kind of dynamic gives a dynamic or issues a dynamic response upon the disobedience of these agents who are manipulating the free will, that as an award that God has given them, to be obedient out of liberty, right? So when they manipulate it and become malevolent, God dynamically reproaches them, and it has new words like disciplining them, abandoning them. So which is contrary to some of the words that he gave them as in the form of promises
So just so
before
I
or
can
prior.
understand, Daniel, real quick to nail it down, are you saying that God is like authoring the choices of his agents, or are you not saying that? I'm not quite gathering it.
Sorry, what did you say,
Or are
Smokey?
you saying God is authoring the choices of the agents that he creates? Or
No,
are you
I'm
okay,
not
or are
saying
you
that. I'm
saying
not
that
saying he's
my
authoring.
position has to say that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Okay. That I think is a little bit of a category error, but I want to let you finish before I answer it. I just wanted to clarify if you weren't saying that this was, I just want to make sure you weren't putting your position or you were saying this was what my position entails to. I just wanted to make sure. So go ahead.
Okay. So the reason why I'm saying that is when God has these timeless decisions being made already, they are necessarily true. And they have, once they are pronounced, they become predictions, and a necessary outcome will ensue because God's decisions that's foregone in timelessness have to necessarily be realized in reality. So it makes God a deterministic God who, at the same time, is in this dilemma whether he has really given absolute free will to his agents or is pretty much dictating that free will to perform a set of or a series of actions in a linear time frame for which he has already made decisions in the past or before time. So, timeless speech is not essential to divine will and agency. It may be a misappropriation of a necessary trait of the divine agency. I don't necessarily see decisions made in a um, timeless way as essential to the divine will and agency. And in my opinion, that really does not define God's nature as justified through his attributes, because they inhibit his omnipotence to have a dynamic volition with the agents of free will.
So is essentially what I'm getting from this is that if you cannot experience emotions like a human, you can't experience emotions. Is that kind of what I'm getting from this? Because like, let me put it this way. Let me put it a different way. Let me start back. Let me backtrack a little bit. Let's say so there's two possible realities. One where Moses talks to the rock, and one where Moses strikes the rock. There's two possible realities. God wants him to do one thing, and there's two possible realities. Moses is either going to listen or he's not going to listen. Now, before that event has ever happened in reality, could you agree that God could have chosen what he would have done with either one of Moses' decisions?
Uh, I would say the actualities were not decided by God. The actuality, God was aware in his omniscience of the probabilities, and striking the rock twice would have been like that's a probability that Moses could do. He could strike it once, twice, or thrice, for
Well, yeah,
example,
but
right?
I'm not talking about a God that deals in probabilities. My God is omniscient. He does know everything. But he also
So
knows along the lines of middle knowledge. Middle knowledge means God knows all possible realities, not and actually, I might even argue this would be a completely different thing. It's not really germane to what we're talking about. I would argue that God possibly even knows all impossible realities. But anyway, nonetheless, God is fully aware of the spectrum and range and scope of the creation that he made and the ranges and possibilities all therein, and has decisions pre-made depending upon whatever his free will agents choose to do from the beginning. And this is more of the Molinistic perspective, because the way you're unpacking it, you're actually going backwards. You're actually making God required to act upon knowledge as if it's necessary, instead of starting back at the beginning and saying, of all possible realities that emerge, God could have chosen what he wanted to do, whatever each one of his free will agents chose to do. So, and what it sounds like is maybe there isn't quite a clarity in terms of an understanding of the difference between, say, hard determinism and soft determinism. And to clarify that for anyone in the audience that isn't understanding, you should know about this, especially if you're going to go out and you're going to attempt to tackle Calvinists or fatalists or determinists. This is something you need to be very intimately aware of about God's reality and his creation. Hold on. I'm so sorry, guys. 2 seconds. I will be right back. 2 seconds.
Take your time.
All right, no problem. All right, I guess I'll throw a question at you while we're waiting and all that, and I'll repeat it to Smokey. Do you assert that God himself has beliefs?
God himself has beliefs. Well, I would say so. I would say so. I would say yes.
Okay. I'm so sorry.
I don't know if you heard Smokey, but I had thrown out a question because I had no idea.
I am.
Oh,
I'm sorry. So one thing, so just to get back to it, when we're talking about Moses and these two possible realities that emerge, I want to go ahead and reframe it. I want to talk about actually one particular example with Joseph and his brothers. You know, Joseph was sold into slavery. So Joseph is decided to be hated by his brothers. Part of this, we understand, is instigated by a dream that he has, which he decides to go and share with his brothers. His brothers get extremely jealous, and they decide, well, we hate Joseph. He's getting all the attention from his father. We don't like him. So they're going to take Joseph, and they're going to basically capture him and sell him into slavery. Now, God knew this was going to happen. God was fully aware that this was an event that was going to happen. We also know that God is all powerful and that he could have chosen to stop it. Now, what is the simple fact of the matter is that while God knew it was going to happen and could have stopped it, he didn't. Now, this does not mean he authored the decision of the people. He did not believe he authored the decision of the brothers to do this. He didn't reach in their hearts, reprogram their minds, and make them want to do this. This was a manifestation of their own selfish desires and hatred towards their brother, and just jealous envy, covetousness, really, of the position amongst their father, and really kind of being the favorite. This was just a manifestation of their disgust, their general hatred and evil that was in their hearts directed toward their brother. God didn't author this. It exists. And this is where we see in the passage, and we see later on where it says, what you meant, and Joseph is talking to his brothers, is what you meant for evil, God had meant for good. Now, the determinists, the fatalists, will look at that passage, like the Calvinists, and they'll say, oh, God made the brothers do this. God intentionally made the brothers do this. God pre-programmed their brains. He could have changed things in a certain way, but he didn't. And he made sure and absolutely that his brothers would want to do this. However, the Molinist, or even the compatibilist, or the soft determinist, which again, this is another brand of Calvinism, which if you guys are going to argue with Calvinism, you should know this, which is the soft determinism, which is basically more of what I presented, that God did not author the decision, the evil of their hearts. It just was there, and he just didn't do anything to stop it. You know, and in doing so, basically allowed that to be his will that manifested. That does not mean that God determined it. That does not mean that God created a necessary reality where that had to happen. It was an event that occurred. And this could have happened any other number of ways that didn't have to go exactly the way this story did. With the brothers developing this hatred in their heart, maybe the brothers had chosen differently. And maybe there was a different plan or some other way to go about where the salvation of the people would have emerged. We don't know, but this is what the decisions of the free will agents chose to do. And God operated within that dynamic of the free will agent choices to bring about his will or the best possible ends based upon the conclusions of the free will agents, based upon their actions. So you can see God operating, and I believe this is seen clearly in scripture, how God operates with reality. This is his good pleasure. This is his exercise of sovereignty, is to actually work with reality instead of simply micromanaging it, like some sort of little model that he's set up that's pre-programmed to operate in a specific way. In this regard, reality is organic, it's alive, it's valuable because it's full of expressions of free will. The thing that makes our expression towards God in terms of worship and faith so incredibly valuable is partially because we could have chosen otherwise. In a reality where we don't have the option to disobey God, our choices to obey God are really just, I mean, who cares? You're just a robot. I mean, what is that relationship? I mean, what good is it to have a Stepford wife, some automaton that you program? Like, how organic and real is that relationship? Is that fulfilling? No. And God's good pleasure was to have fulfilling relationships with his creation. And this requires free will agency. And that also means that when the agent decides to exercise their free will, you don't show up and stop them doing it because it's not exactly dead on the bullseye. Which, by the way, that's what all sin is. Only God makes decisions perfectly. Everything we do will be somewhere outside of the scope because only God can do it all perfectly. Okay? So if God shows up every time we're not on bullseye, what's the point of having free will anyway? He's negating free will. There is no free will if that's what's happening. So it's important to understand the importance of the primary feature of reality. The only reason this reality exists, its teleology, is to provide an environment for a direct, real, meaningful relationship with the Creator. And that needs to be basically the type of reality that we're in, where you can choose to do the wrong thing. Because now when you choose to do the right thing, it has value because you didn't have to choose that. You have a chance for a real, genuine, actual relationship with God. He's not a spiritual rapist. And this is my big problem with Calvinism, because I'm sorry, Brett, I shouldn't say that. I apologize.
No, that's cool, man. I get it.
He's not forcing you into a love relationship. This is not how any of us recognize love to be. One of absolute, unequivocated force. This is not how any of us see love. So I don't know how we can adopt any type of idea of deterministic reality. And unfortunately, Daniel, no, I don't agree. I don't think that my position leads to any type of strict determinism whatsoever, because it doesn't require God authoring the will of his agents. It just requires him making decisions prematurely before time of what he would do when they choose based upon what they choose. And that's really all it requires. And God can know what choice they're going to make and choose to not act on that knowledge. God is not required to act on all knowledge that he has at his disposal. That's a violation of his free will. Just like if I know tomorrow's winning lottery numbers, I don't have to do anything with that knowledge. But if I want to, I can go down and buy a ticket and be a lottery winner. But I'm not a lottery winner just by knowing what the lottery numbers are. So I'll yield with that.
Hey, thank you. I mean, you laid out the story of Joseph in a very agreeable manner. I mean, I totally agree with the whole narrative that you brought about in the storyline of Joseph. But the sort of conclusions that you draw, I believe, are where the problem is, because when you say the decisions have been made already in a timeless fashion, because God knew exactly what would happen. And but you also go on to say, oh, it need not have happened in a particular way because the agents with free will could have acted in a slightly different way, and the outcomes could slightly be different. But God knew all those possibilities beforehand because He's omniscient. And I have a categorical argument here for you to deal with. How can, I mean, given that God is free will, uh, God has His will, and it's free will basically, and agents also have received the gift of free will. So agents do exercise the gift of free will. And how could God Almighty, who provided agents with this free will, sort of hijack their free will in knowing the actualities of what these agents would go on to determine utilizing their free will? So it's kind of like an argument which is at the crossroads here. So free will by nature um, entails that the choice that the agent would go on to determine is cannot be known unless and until the agent comes up with that with that
That's
decision.
categorically false. That's categorically false.
So why would you say it's false?
Because what you're saying is that whatever the choice is necessary. That's not, you're working backwards. The eventuality of the choice does not dictate the choice. You're saying, what you're basically saying is that the conclusion dictates the cause. That's asinine. That's philosophically incoherent. You're saying the conclusion or the effect, it causes the cause. It's nonsensical. This is not how things operate. There's no connection between the two. The one is the antecedent. You're not, you can't affirm, the precedent with the antecedent. You're basically trying to make it, justify itself. And that's just not how it works. What the conclusion of the thing doesn't mean that the decision was necessary. It could have been either way. And even if God knows which one it is, He's not required to act upon it to make sure it's one or the other. He can allow it to the consequence of the free will agent and the environment He's set up. He's not required to act upon it. And I need some sort of argument that shows that, if that's really what you're presenting.
I kind of didn't really get what you just concluded out of my explanation. Basically, you are the one who's telling me that God has made these decisions in timeless way, right? And can you go into the nitty-gritty of these decisions that God has made in the story of Joseph, for example? What sort of decisions did He make?
Well, let me put it this: we can track this back any number of ways, but the point is that you're not, in taking the story of Joseph, you're not required to take some sort of fatalistic idea that Joseph was forced into this situation, that this was a necessary reality. That's not what it is. The free will agents chose this, and God worked with it to basically bring out. Had they chose differently, God would have made different decisions to bring about His will. See, just because this unfolded, just because this is what unfolded, doesn't mean it was the necessary reality. And just because God foresaw it doesn't mean it was the necessary reality. Again, He's not required to act in any type of way in reality to make sure anything happens in any type of way if He doesn't want to. He can do that. He can certainly alter things and do some sorts of dynamic things. But in general, what we see is that God respects His relationship dynamic with His reality, and that generally His choices always fall in line with continuing to protect the primary teleology of reality, which is this meaningful relationship. This is why God just doesn't take, good people and snap them out of reality and put them on a cloud, or give every person their own planet and solve all the wars in the world and do all these things that we supposedly expect Him to do. This is all part of the essentiality of reality, to be a free will interrelationship dynamic with the Creator. This is why it is this way. It does not mean He's in any way dictating the choices of His agents just because He knows what they're going to do. That does not require him in any type of way operating on that knowledge to make sure they choose one way or the other, just because he knows what they're going to do. It's just non sequitur. It's not connected.
You were saying, Smokey, that we don't get our own world. No endorsements here, folks, but Mormons offer the planets.
Well, there's reasons when the atheists come to you and say, hey, why didn't God during the flood snap all the babies away and put them all on their own planet? And this crazy crap that like T-Jump would throw at me. And like not even understanding how he completely misunderstands the entire purpose of reality and the challenge from the Christian worldview. It's a completely incoherent challenge. We're not even talking about really a possible reality here. We're not talking about a reality where God has any type of real, genuine, meaningful relation. Hold on. God, hold on a second.
Okay, no problem. Well, I won't ask any philosophical questions whenever he needs to take a break or you take a break. I'll just simply ask you how you been. Are you feeling all right?
Hey, yeah, I'm feeling all right. I just got up too early today, but I'm nothing wrong. I'm all right. So I just want to understand from you now,
Stuff
as
today.
I'm talking to
Anyway, go
Smokey.
ahead.
I just finished the Smokey, and I'll jump back with you.
No, you don't
So
have
I want
to.
to
I
know
was
from
just
you,
asking
Brett.
how your day was. Go ahead.
How do you think the conversation is going between me and Smokey here? Where do you think is um, the understanding not coming together between me and Smokey?
Well, unfortunately, Daniel, it's not really, this wasn't really meant for a debate, but if you were to get an opinion on this, it appears as though you're falling into some of the Calvinist views where you're kind of taking away the concept of free will. That's what I'm getting from it. And he's trying to explain something else. Would you guys mind if I gave an analogy? And if you want to rip it apart, you can.
Sure.
Being that I'm a gamer, my games are programmed and they're set up and they're predetermined on how they're going to work. But once I grab the controller and my avatar within the program, I can move it around and I have the framework to be able to meet the goals. The goals are known, everything about it, the levels, the environment, it's all known, but I have the ability to navigate through it. That's how I see it. If you want to tear it up, you can.
It's an interesting analogy. I think in a way, yes, you can do within your decision making of the character, just taking the character in the game as an example, you can do anything within the scope of what the programmers have set for you to do. And now you could progress along with the developer's intended story, that they programmed in there, that said that if you do this type of thing will happen. You'll have a cutscene and you'll have this interaction. Then you get a chance to do this quest. And if you choose to do it, you'll get this prize. Fine. Programmers also allowed it for you to just, I don't know if there's this feature in Fallout where you can just sit in the grass and just do nothing forever.
Yes.
You could turn the console off. You could self-delete. You could, wander into bandit camps nonstop until you're just sick of regenerating and throw the game in the corner. There's lots of things that you can choose to do, none of which even necessarily require you operating within the scope of what the programmers require, which is to follow the storyline. They expect you to. They plan something for you if you're willing to go along with it, if you're willing to make that choice, and there will be events that occur that they pre-program that will occur, but they're not forcing you to choose to do that. You can go fuck around in the desert and just hunt animals, or shoot the wild rat creatures or the evolved scorpions or whatever the hell it is they have in that game anymore these days, and just do nothing other than that, and not actually do the thing that the developers clearly intended you to do, which was to follow the script, because why else would they have written it? But they're not so rigid as to think you have to follow the script, and they're not going to program something in there that's going to force you to follow the script and violate your free will. I mean, some of them might, but it depends on the game. But anyway, I think it's a good analogy. I like it. It's fine. I can use it.
I've got a few questions, Smokey, that I would like to clarify.
Real quick, I do need to clarify something. He's right. I do play Fallout, and usually the games I play are open world that give you the ability for free will to do whatever the hell you want. You're not forced to move forward like Mario grabbing mushrooms and trying to get to the flag. It's not like that. So very good. Continue on. Go ahead, Mr. Daniel.
So yeah, I just had a few questions in my mind right now to sort of get to the bottom of what Smokey is saying, because I do know what Smokey is saying now. I think I can assert that I know what he's telling me about how God's decisions still are inclusive of the agent's free will to exercise at his own volition. But I just need some clarification here. So God, I can imagine God had timelessly decided to gi- give some dreams to Joseph. Okay, so you would agree with me. So this decision was for timelessness, belongs to the timelessness category, for example. And then the brothers got jealous of Joseph's potential favor with God and his with his love from his father and all of that sort of stuff. So the jealousy of the brothers, was this a decision of God? I'm just trying to understand.
No, because
Okay,
again, he's not the author of their decisions of what to operate from, their epistemology, what they choose to adopt as their priority, their emotional set. These are all within their own decision-making processes decide upon themselves. They're accountable for their decisions and how they choose to operate based upon whatever stimulus and information is given to them.
gotcha,
And it falls upon them as to what they're going to do with it. And
gotcha.
God had a decision, regardless of what they chose to do. God had a decision of what he was going to do. And that alone, right there, doesn't mean either one of those decisions, to covet or to not covet, to be jealous or not jealous, was necessarily or required to happen. And anyway,
Gotcha. But you do agree that God had, in timelessness, decided that He would give some dreams to Joseph. Do you?
sure, that's fine. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'd have to agree
Okay.
with
So
that.
in that case, my investigation would be taking this course that when Abraham, like for example, when Abraham was called by God, obviously, what do you think? I mean, why would if Abraham was, like for example, a bad guy, not worthy of God's calling, and Abraham was just one of these guys in town who were like dedicated to idols and all of that sort of stuff, for example, whom God did not call, um, call out. So if Abraham had no volition out of his own to search for God or to look for God, for example, okay, so the decision of Abraham to be a bad person obviously was his, just like the brothers of Joseph had their own decision to be feeling jealous of Joseph. So if Abraham was something like that, whom God could not call, okay, so the decision that God had made earlier to to like give dreams to Joseph would not have come into fruition. Would you agree? The hypothetical. Would you agree?
Say that one more time.
Okay, so given the premise that God had made a decision in timelessness to give a dream to Joseph, right? That's a premise.
That's fine.
But if Abraham was a bad person whom God could not call to his
So you're saying
services,
if Abraham had chosen to reject or something, is that what you're
yeah,
saying?
the hypothetical, right? So if Abraham was this bad person whom God could not call and bless him for his seed to become a nation in covenant with Almighty God, then the timeless decision to give dreams to Joseph would not have come to fruition, would not have materialized, correct? Would you agree?
See, like the way you do this, like what's happening is you keep reframing it back into determinism. Like, and I know you're not trying to, but like I keep reiterating this. His eternal decisions are based upon multiple possible realities, not just one. Not just the one that's going to happen. And you make it sound like his only decision he made is only in the one that actually is going to happen. What I'm saying is he has the full set of middle knowledge to know his decision and also the outcome all the way to eternity of each one of those decisions. So like he's not determining which one is happening. When you say he's made the decision beforehand, you always isolate it to only the one that happens. That's because you keep reaching back into this deterministic framework. You're kind of ignoring what I'm saying, that the eternal knowledge is that he knows what he'll do in any possible reality, in any possible set of choices of the scope and range that he's allowed his creation to have. He knows what he's going to do. He doesn't just know what he's going to do with the reality that actually manifests. Like he knows all of them. So when you're talking about eternal knowledge, you don't want to negate or let out that fact. Otherwise, you're kind of forcing me in this questioning into this deterministic reality, because all you're focusing on is God's knowledge about the one thing that actually happens, not the middle knowledge of all possible realities. And that's where we're getting our wires crossed here, because you keep reframing it back into determinism.
I gotta let you guys know something real quick. I don't know what the deal is. It rained earlier today, but for some reason, every like 10, 15 minutes, I keep getting knocked out of the room. It's throwing up some kind of error. I'm having internet problems. So if I disappear, continue on. Hopefully the thing will just continue to play, even if my ass gets virtually raptured.
Is this on StreamYard, Brad, or what's it on?
I think that, yeah, it's StreamYards, but I think it's the damn browser. What browser do you two use? Because
I typically use Chrome, usually.
Yeah, same here.
All right, I'm going to have to start using Chrome then. I've been using Edge for a long time.
I've always used Chrome for StreamYard. I usually don't have problems with it. So
sorry about that. I'll definitely, next time I open a show, I'll have Chrome, and I'll probably even get Firefox just to make sure.
So it's just, the thing to draw to, Daniel, is that God's decisions, while eternal, are not somehow set to be absolutely necessary, because he makes decisions based upon all possible realities. And even though he knows what reality will happen, he's not forced to operate on that knowledge or change anything to make sure a different reality emerges. In his sovereignty, he can leave it to the manifestation of his free will agents and choose what he's going to do based upon those decisions, whatever those decisions may be, which means he has basically the decision pre-made before anything in his set of all infinite knowledge. He has it all pre-made, that he is indeed going to do what he's going to do no matter what reality emerges. That does not mean the reality that emerges is necessary. It's just a non sequitur. It's not connected.
I totally get this. Better than we had a conversation, I think, a couple of days ago. I didn't get this facet of your thoughts that have been really made clear to me now. I do understand where you're coming from, and the sort of premise that you're laying here for God, that God has the foreknowledge of everything and has made those decisions, but that does not necessitate those exact outcomes. But whatever probabilistic or outcomes do result, God is aware of those exact actualities that may unfold through these agents of free will. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, because now it sounds like you're making it sound like open theism, which is God doesn't really know the future. He just kind of guesses. He just makes intelligent guesses, and that's not what I'm going from. It's not a probabilistic knowledge. Like God has
the moment I use the word probability, you sort of make a decision that it's something different. And the way you give me the impressions of how God makes decisions without using the word probability, I'm still given to think it's probabilistic in a way. Like I perceive that to be probabilistic in a way, because even though you're articulating without the use of the word probability or probabilistic, but still you're telling me the same set of
Well,
things.
let's say if God knows the probability of something that's going to happen, is he required to change it?
I'm not saying that he's required to change it
Well, see,
either.
then it's just a non-point. It's just a non sequitur. It's a non-point. He decided before all of creation what he would do with every decision that his free will agents chose to do with. It's just that simple. It doesn't mean
But
he
why would you even
required or
assert that,
authored
for
or set
example,
it up to
Smokey?
where they had to choose that thing.
If I may
These are
stop you here,
completely.
if I may stop you here, why do you even feel obliged, or why do you even think it's fundamental to your faith in your episteme that you have to come to this premise that God has decided everything in a timeless way? Why do you even
It's
subscribe to
necessary.
this view? Because
It's necessary because of his timelessness. I can't attach any chronology to him. So there's no progression of thoughts. There can't be a progression of thoughts. There can't be one thought followed by another thought followed by another thought. Just like
so you-
where I used the example of the Tesseract the other day, the box, and the box opens, and every stage of the box opening is all happening at one time. Okay, that's the Tesseract. It's all happening at one time. I use this kind of as an example. This is probably a terrible one because this is even way below where God's at. But imagine that in the idea that God can have thoughts that have no chronology. They're just there. They exist. They are part of his thing. The decision, there was never a point in time, because there's no time to God. There's no point in time where he didn't decide to create reality. The decision to create reality is an eternal decision. There's no chronology to it. There's no progress. There's nowhere like he's sitting up there and, just enjoying eternity, a constant progression of infinite regress, and says to himself, I think I should do something. I think I'm going to create reality. This is not how God's thinking works unless you're trying to attach chronology to God. So he has to be timeless, and so does his essence. So does his nature. And you cannot attach chronology in any part of him, any section of him, any attribute of him, in any type of way you want to dice it, because now you have a whole bunch of philosophical problems, including the infinite regress. If you have an infinite number of progressive linear God thoughts before the thought that leads to our reality never exists, because we never get to the point where he makes a decision for our reality to exist, because it's infinite previous to us. So you cannot reasonably attach time to God. You have to in some way reconcile that these components of God are timeless. These things that you're describing, these attributes of God that you're attributing to him, have to be timeless in terms of how you dissect them. So, and this is just what necessarily follows, that all of God's decisions about reality were made beforehand, but that doesn't mean it's decided in a deterministic fashion, that he was somehow required to force things to happen in such a way for him to ultimately make that decision. This isn't coherent. There's no connective argument for that. He can allow the free will agents to choose as they want and already make his decisions outside of time, what he would do based upon whatever they chose to do. That doesn't mean that what manifests is somehow a necessary reality. Inasmuch so that if I program a robot and by some complex miracle, I extend free will to the robot, and I know what's going to happen if it goes in the right door, and I know what's going to happen if it goes in the left door. If it goes in the right door, it doesn't mean I made it go in the right door, because I know what's going to happen when it goes in the right door. You get what I'm saying?
It's like a mom and a dad, isn't it? They know that when they have a child, the child's going to end up having heartbreak one day. Child will end up going to school, even though the experience hasn't happened. They simply know that's what's going to take place, right?
I'm going to fetch myself an iced tea real quick. Daniel, take your time to respond. I'll be listening. I'm just going to go in the kitchen and grab myself a beverage. Actually, probably an iced tea. Yeah, maybe sparkling water. I'll be right back. Just give me like 2 minutes. Go ahead. Take your time. I'll be listening.
Love to hear you,
Sure.
Daniel. And I do have a question for you guys when he gets back, and it'll probably throw a wrench in the monkey business. Go ahead. It's all yours, Daniel. Time to rock.
So I kind of get what Smokey is saying. Mm.
He's trying to explain if I'm wrong, I hope he corrects me because he says he can hear. But there's a difference between having the knowledge of something and making something happen. You get it? It's like you know what would happen.
No, I mean, yeah, I totally get the point that God may have knowledge of all sorts of possibilities, and not just possibilities, but actualities, for example. Even if I grant that to you, but to the statement that God has made decisions, those decisions, like, that's different from God knowing, right? Omniscience um, is separate thing from attributing God to have made decisions that would require necessary reality, right? Say, for example, the robot, if it goes on the right, there should be thunder and lightning, and if it goes on the left, there should be sunshine, for example. If that's the decision that's happened, in a timeless fashion, then God, in a way, is a deterministic God. He is actually influencing things in his own way, because he has made those decisions in a timeless way. You know what I mean?
I think that that's where you and Smokey are having your conundrum. You continue to refer to things like, for instance, the decision of the robot and the carnival ride and all that as a necessary thing that has to happen, that the robot necessarily has to go through one of those type of doors. It's very possible that if it did go left and it was raining, that the sun might come out in a couple minutes. It might be that it gets on the carnival ride and the carnival ride just simply doesn't work and he goes on to do something different. God knows all the alternative outcomes that could possibly happen.
I mean, I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that. Okay, what I'm
I
denying is the
know.
decisions of God. See, suppose for example, if God had made the decision of providing dreams to Joseph, and if Joseph was making bad decisions for himself, then the decision of God to provide Joseph his dreams would not materialize. Would you agree?
Yeah, I believe that God influenced him through dreams, sure, but that's different than actually making him or forcing him. He could have acted in a way that was outside of the purview of his dreams.
So therefore, what I'm saying, Smokey, Brett, is the decision of God that He has made in a timeless way would not materialize. And if you agree with that, then basically we have no disagreements. Like I'm very much in line with how I would say that is, God making all those redundant decisions that could be curtailed by agents of free will is not even necessary. You know what I mean? I'm coming from
Right.
that premise. For God to make those decisions that agents of free will could curtail wasn't even necessary. So to attribute to God to make those decisions in a timeless fashion is basically redundancy.
Well, let me throw the wrench at you because I understand that you have a different faith and an outlook on God, even though there seems to be a lot of stuff we relate with and identify with. Do you believe that God lives in the present, the future, and the past all at the same time? Think about this. If he's timeless, does he exist in all areas of linear as well as spatial?
Okay, God exists in a timeless way. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I don't have double thoughts or second thoughts. right there. But what I believe is God has the volition and the potency, omnipotency, to perform in anew, like as is applied, or in a dynamic way with us. And he need not have he need not have made those decisions in a timeless way. So not making a decision in a timeless way does not prevent God in having this dynamic relationship with us.
Mhm.
That's my position.
Do you agree that we have literally three options as theists, as those who believe in the God with all these attributes? We either have to believe that everything is predestined, predetermined, basically determinism, or we suggest or imply that we have free will, our own agency, or there's a third choice. Some things are set in stone, but somewhere in the framework we have the ability to choose. Where are you at on that? The only way, I do want to point this out for people who are listening, the only way we can go beyond the three is if God has the ability to limit his own powers and attributes. Does that make sense?
Well, where do you get that from, actually? I mean, I understand the three options that you just laid out, but even to curtail it, to say there's no fourth option, where do you pull this doctrine
Well, I'm
from?
saying that the only way that there can be a fourth option or more than that is if God can limit one of his abilities or more. If he can
Is it possible that
simply,
you could be wrong in deducing that?
well, I'm not really sure that's really considered like an attribute. But I think on a philosophical level, well, I'll give you an example of something, and hopefully I don't screw this up because this is a tongue twister. Do you do you believe that God actually makes choices or has some kind of thinking process like we do, where
I think
information comes to mind into his mind and then he acts on it? What is your view on this?
I believe so. I believe so. That's the case.
So you believe in our real time as we exist as sentient beings, God can do that. Do you, as a Muslim, believe that God has a divine plan or some kind of concept of what he's looking for with his optimal universe?
Yeah, he does.
Okay. Well, it seems like you and I are riding the same wave. We're surfing it, brother. Surfing it.
Yeah, I think there is a little niche area here, which would sort of where we need to find compatibility, and I think Smokey sort of goes like, oh, even if you don't understand this necessarily, obviously, because God is s- beyond our comprehension, we need not understand everything of His, but then goes on to attribute um like timeless decision makings for God. And what's the premise? Like, where do we get this from the Bible? Timeless decisions of Almighty God.
Well, there's well, I can give you an argument for each one of the three categories of God's knowledge as is adopted in Molinism, however you want to approach it. I could start with necessary knowledge. Necessary
So is it
knowledge.
is it I'm so sorry, is it modalism? Modalism is
Oh,
the word?
no, not modalism. Modalism is a heresy that's based upon Arianism or Unitarianism. No,
So what are you even
Molin. It's from a Jesuit priest named Molina, who basically created it. It's a general kind of overarching philosophy about God's
Yeah, can you
relationship.
please respell that for me? I'm sorry, it's Smokey.
Molinism, Molinism. There's a PhD professor who's does a lot of content on Molinism. His name, I forget his name right off the top of my head, but his channel is Free Thinking Ministries, and you can type him in. And he has some very, very interesting arguments. And we have a very, very similar, almost identical take on the solution to the problem of evil as well. The problem of evil is not much of a problem for a Molinist. It is for a Calvinist. It is for a determinist or a fatalist. not so much for an open theist, but the open theist God is just deaf, blind, dumb, and incompetent. So, and yeah, that's true. It's just how it is. I don't care if they don't like that I say that. That is what they describe their God to be. They essentially eliminate, dilute, or destroy all of his intrinsic attributes. So I can support all of the three areas of God's knowledge from Bible, from his own testimony about himself. I can support the Molinistic view biblically in terms
So
of the three
did
categories of knowledge.
you? I was saying something when you were out and about getting a drink for yourself. I was saying you were basically alluding to God making a set of redundant decisions. Is that correct?
I don't understand what you mean by redundant decisions.
Okay, God has made a number of decisions, but they don't have to be necessary actualities, right? That's what he said, right?
Correct. He can make
So
decisions.
some of his decisions could be just redundant, right?
What's that?
Some of his decisions, therefore, could just be redundant, right?
What do you mean redundant? I don't know what you mean.
Because they are not required. They are not required to become necessary actualities, right?
Yeah, no, his decision making is based upon a synergy with the actions of the free will agents. So, and there is a core will that he desires to manifest, that he does operate within reality to bring about. But this is relational. It's not fatalistic. This is where we're getting our fingers crossed, because it seems like you're presenting, or at least defending, a hyper fatalistic reality, which I'm not surprised at, because typically I find Islam to be hyper fatalistic. Usually it's like Calvinism on crack, I usually find. So like I can
Okay,
understand
but
how
I don't necessarily think that to be the case. I'm not in favor of fatalism or Calvinistic ideas that you're trying
well, it
to.
seems like you're kind of defending it whenever you're trying to kind of negate the timeless properties of God's decision making.
I'm only trying to
You're
understand.
potentially kind of defending the idea that this has to be deterministic, or you're defending a deterministic reality.
I don't have a preconceived set of notions here in this particular discussion.
Okay.
I don't subscribe to, say, certain schools of thought within Islam whose ideas of theology or teleology I'm trying to defend. I'm not doing nothing of that. I'm only trying to understand the full spectrum of presentation that you're bringing here, and I see in my own intelligibility or cognition, I
I mean, do
find
you
there
get
are.
what I'm saying when I say just because God knows what he will do with each decision of his agent doesn't mean he made them choose one or the other? Like, you do
I
get
get
that.
that from you. I get it. But you can answer my questions without being. I'm sorry to say this, without being like really judgmental about where
I'm
I'm
not trying to
coming
be
from.
condescending. It's
Yeah,
just the core
yeah.
point, and it doesn't seem to be working its way into the challenge. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, that's where I'm struggling with it.
I just got this point from you that God does make decisions, and not all those decisions are meant to be necessarily actualized in reality. So, therefore, it entails that God does make a set of decisions that become eventually redundant. Because the way He does not necessitate them to come into actuality or reality, because He has a relational relationship with the agents of free will, and He works through them, with them, or He works through them. So this working through them again, so there is this problem of redundancy that God has to deal with. And okay, he can just ignore the redundancy, and there's no problem as such. I'm not saying that is a problem, but I'm saying that is an aspect. And the other thing, that when you're saying he actually works through synergy in a relationship with the agents of free will, again necessitates God to become part of chronology, which you are trying to defend him against. So how do you see this play together?
Do you understand the essence energy distinction and, like, say, core orthodoxy for example? Have you ever come across that?
I might not. So you might have to appraise me about those things.
So when God interacts with reality in any type of way, it's not the fullness of his essence, because the fullness of his essence can't be quantified at this level. This is what basically in the Orthodox Church, and I do like this from their particular perspective. They explain this better usually than the Catholics who tend to lean more towards Thomistic divine simplicity. The Orthodox do better, I think, in terms of delineating the essence energy distinction, because God is transcendental by essence, by nature. So he cannot be in his fullness filtered down into this finite space of his creation, not in entirely. It's a violation of his nature. So what manifests here is a distinction that they notice between the essence and the energies. And there's a lot of Orthodox thinkers that do a lot on this regard and talking about how this relates to how God manifests in reality. So the mistake here generally is requiring God to experience things as men experience things in order to experience anything at all. God can experience things as God and them still be just as meaningful, arguably more so, than experiencing them as a man does. And because we experience things in linear progression, we expect God to experience things in linear progression, but God is timeless, so God can't experience things in linear progression. So it must be something else. So even when I'm giving you all of these statements and facts, they're really ultimately analogous. And at the end of the day, to fully quantify and fully understand exactly how God's timeless mind works, well, let's be real. I mean, the only way to know that would mean we would have to be God. The only way to fully know God would have to be God. So I don't think that's within our purview to be able to even understand. But there are certain things we can understand about it through the process of, like what I just did, process of logical elimination and definition by negation. Maybe sometimes when it comes to God, and this is generally true throughout all of church history, when people overreach, when they try to define God too much, they end up in heresy. Nestorianism or Valentinianism or Gnosticism or Nicolaitanism, whatever that was. These things that God hated, perversities against his nature, trying to overreach, trying to define him philosophically at our level a little bit too much, violating the clear statements of Scripture by demanding that God be completely understandable and definable. And these were always seen as heresies. And through the emergence of these heresies, we actually ended up getting a clearer picture of theology. And one of the things that we understood basically in principle and how we're relating to God, defining God, there's two primary ideologies that you generally have to abide by and still be respectful of his nature as a transcendental enemy. One is analogical predication. You can't draw any one-to-one correlation of exactly what God is like to anything in creation, because that's a blasphemy. You can't do that. Analogical predication, and the other one is, God, sorry, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. I was just talking about it. Apologies.
You said predication.
It's been a long day. Sorry?
You said predication. I was trying.
Yeah, analogical predication was the first one. There was another one. My brain was white on it, and it just slipped out. I apologize.
I was trying to help you get the memory back.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. I had them there. But anyway, the church has sounded from the very beginning that there's necessary constants in terms of how we relate to and understand God. Oh, I'm sorry. And the next principle, the second principle I was going to talk about, is that in many instances of defining God's nature or certain attributes to him, sometimes we only can define it via negation. What this means is you can't always define exactly what it is, but you can generally say what it isn't. And that's what ends up happening with a lot of these overreaching heresies that emerged in church history. They said, not that. They didn't necessarily go along the lines of clearly defining or delineating beyond what the person was trying to present. They didn't really even start doing stuff like that until 1050 with the Filioque and the Great Church Split. Such a grand disappointment because they violated the very central core ideology of how they generally went about approaching the nature of God. And it was a complete catastrophe for the entire Christian world. But typically, in a sense, we understood that when we're referring to God, we have to be very, very delicate and gentle, or we easily tread into the realms of heresy by trying to drag God down to our level to be easily understood.
You guys
This is
ready?
all analogous. Everything I'm communicating here is all ultimately analogous to the grand position that we are dealing with a transcendental entity. Daniel, you seem to agree that he has timeless thinking. So if you have a different model of the timeless thinking and how that operates, that doesn't break down into hyper fatalism, I promise you, I'm all ears.
Yeah. So let me just now try to understand a different aspect. I mean, we have been talking philosophy until this point in time. I would just want to get into the Bible and
Sure.
understand some of the things. I mean, one more thing is you say certain things
Hold on real
about.
quick, Daniel. Daniel, do you need something to drink? Maybe some coffee or tea? Because you look a little wore out. It's been a rough day for you as
He's had a
well.
long day.
Hey, he looks like he's had a hard day. Do you need something to drink, man?
Don't worry about it. I'm okay.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So, um, there are two aspects that I want to bring to your attention and get your sort of your thoughts there. One is you have said a few different times that the God of the Bible is different because he's timeless, and God of in Islam it's different. Uh, I don't necessarily see that to be the case, but yeah, I would love to have your thoughts there, um, based on the philosophy that you were trying to articulate. But the most important thing, the first thing that I want to discuss now is um, how do you understand when the Bible says God is the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega? So, how do you understand the first and the last thing?
Um, well, again, this to me would be at best analogical language. I don't think the Bible is somehow violating the core intrinsic principle of analogical predication that pretty much the whole church has held to since its inception. So I do believe that in terms of that, it's still analogical. It's basically what we would call in literary genre, to parse it out, it's what we would call a merism. Are you familiar with that term, merism? Okay,
I'll write
so
it down if you can spell that for me, please.
merism, merism.
Okay.
And a merism is basically like, I'll give you an example. Like, let's say you lost your keys, right? And you walk up to me and you're like, I can't find my keys. I've looked high and low. Now, you wouldn't think that I would take that to mean you looked on the ceiling and you looked on the floor, which if you took a real literal take at that, hey, I looked high and low, that doesn't mean I only looked high and only looked low. It means I looked everywhere. That's a merism. So it's kind of like taking the two extremes of a thing and using it to communicate the whole. So when God is saying Alpha and Omega, or when he says he created the heavens and the earth, so the utmost point with the lowest most point is meant to connotate everything, all of reality. This is a merism. It's the same idea here, that God is using basically analogical statements about his nature, something we can understand because we only understand things through the process of linear thinking, linear time. He's going to communicate at that level. He's going to use an analogy, and he's going to use it in the form of a literary structure known as a merism. This basically communicates that he is all. He is timeless. He is before everything that exists. He is after anything that exists. He is the only absolute of all of reality, the only essential necessary being.
Okay.
Are you basically saying, Smokey, that the starting and end point that he gives in his analogy is talking about the very origin of the universe to the
It's
end?
presenting an idea of his totality of supremacy and position. It's not saying he has a beginning and he has an end. Like he is the beginning and the end. No more so than when you say, I looked high and I looked low. This is a common turn of phrase. And it seems that many times, I don't know why, but when we interpret Bible, we forget that language is more than just words and definitions. It's cliches, axioms, idioms, turns of phrases, cultural understandings. I mean, 1,000 years from now someone could dig up a children's book, look at the word butterfly, and thought there were flies made of butter flying around. They didn't have a cultural context of how our colloquial language actually works. They would look at the etymology. They would look at, just like they mistranslated monogenes for the better part of 400 or 500 years, because
That does happen though,
but they didn't
especially in
understand.
religion.
But they didn't
Especially in religion,
understand that there
that does
were other
happen.
uses for the word. The only thing they had context was basically here, and they ended up parsing the etymology to get the definition. That is not always how language works. That's just not always
That
how.
does happen. By the way, I should tell you that does happen in religions. It happens a lot. I really heard an Islamic sheikh make that mistake.
Well, yeah,
For
and it's
golden butterflies, he understood literal gold material made butterflies
right.
instead of understanding the monarch butterflies to be what was
Right. And what would
implied.
that mean, right? If you heard someone say like golden butterflies, you wouldn't generally think butterflies made out of gold. You would think golden color. Maybe they were just
Yeah,
colored that. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, again, this is all about how there is components to cultural communication that you should understand if you're trying to interpret the scripture. This is why I despise hyper fundamentalists, KJV only, those types of nonsense, insane movements. It is theology for the lazy man to take the simplest, easiest way out in the approach to your faith with the most minimal amount of effort at critical thinking or application of intelligence.
Mm,
It's the lazy man's way out to try and
mm.
claim God has to be simple, theology has to be simple, sanctification has to be simple, salvation has to be simple, relationship has to be simple. Where is this? Where is this idea that the most valuable things are simple to achieve and attain? Where is this idea? Where does this nonsensical virtue come from? I don't get it. And I never
I
will.
don't.
It is
I
not
don't necessarily.
virtuous to think
I
that
don't
the great.
necessarily see a problem with that. To be honest with you, um, with the insinuation that God is simple. For example, I would consider God is simple because as a human being, I have limited ability to have a relationship with God. And in that limited ability, I see God as a very simple being to have a relationship with. So I don't necessarily see why it can't be simple from a human point of view. God may be far more complex than how much I would perceive of Him. But to me, in my relationship with God, it can be very simple. I have a Creator who gave me life, and I relate to Him, and I thank Him, and that's as simplest as it could get to me, and I'm comfortable with that. I see my relationship with God being that real simple. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I want to just come back to
Well,
this
yeah, but
alpha and the omega thing.
the relationship being simple and the deity being simple, those aren't interconnected. I don't understand this idea of the I don't really even know what you mean by the entity being simple, to be completely honest with you. I'm not sure what you mean.
Look, if the
Because it
entity,
almost sounds like you're saying like you can only relate to God if God's relating to you as a man. I keep getting these types of like kind of entailments or seemingly like prepackaged somewhere in your statements is kind of this idea that like if somehow God is not experiencing a relationship the way you do, then it can't be true or valid. Am I getting this wrong? Because that's kind of
no,
seems like what
I'm
you're
not
telling me.
saying it becomes
I
invalid.
may I
What I'm
say
saying
something
is,
real quick? Just real quick. I always keep things really fast. I have never in my entire life heard of a simple relationship, especially when the relationship involves loyalty, honor, commitment, love, and all these things. It
Good
starts
point.
getting really, really messy as you go. But go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, those points that you bring to the table are valid, Brett. I mean, I commend you for that, for bringing those things in. Those do
Anyone out there have a
complicate
simple relationship with God?
those things do complicate things from its simple relationship, and makes it complex relationship for sure. But I think that does not really take away the simplicity of an ignorant person to have a relationship with God. That's what I'm saying. See, my son can relate to me as his father in his simplistic terms, and may not really comprehend the love, the regard, the care, um, the expectation, all of those things, because he has the simplistic conscience or intelligence with which he tries to relate to me, and that can be kept
You
that simple.
experience your love for him with higher complexity than he experiences it towards you, is basically what you're
That's it.
saying.
So for him, it's simple, right? Yeah,
For
Yeah,
him, it's
I
simple.
think
For him, it's
Smokey,
very.
what you were talking about with fundamentalists and how they do things. When I hang out with people like that, where I get the view that they don't want to go any further, do research, I feel like they're looking for a friend with French benefits, or however they say it. They want to be saved and they want the cookies, but they don't want to get to know the person. They don't actually want to be close. They just want the goodies.
Agreed. Agreed. It does tend to reach into that, what it seems. Yeah. A lot of people will adopt things that do just feel good to believe, you know. There are people who will adopt things like in the sense of believing that, their dad loves them when clearly they didn't and abandoned them, but they'll believe it, and they'll even concoct wild, speculations and arguments to try and believe it. Some people have crazy hypochondriac, type symptoms where they believe they have cancer, and it doesn't matter if they get 20 different doctors to say that they don't, will still say that they have cancer. So they will still believe it even if the doctors say otherwise. So I mean, we do have the ability to choose our epistemology. We do have the ability to essentially choose what paths we want to entertain in terms of our thinking and our methodology of discovering truth as to what we really ultimately want to adopt. And this is where we see really crazy, insane, I would argue, extra biblical, dangerous doctrines like free grace, hyper grace, OSAS, Jehovah's Witness, Seventh Day Adventists, all these radical, divergent ideas, and all these things that really are just repackaged heresies from the past. That if most Christians dedicated time to diligent study and looking back and really growing in their faith and learning more, they wouldn't struggle as much as learning as to what to avoid and what to keep, because a lot of this stuff has been tested and refuted or adopted in the past, and they just don't want to learn, and they just don't want to put any work in. To me, my relationship with God is absolutely far from simple. And granted, you know what? There's some people, God bless them. Daniel Mayo, some of you guys know exactly who I'm talking about there. Daniel Mayo's a real super special boy. And he's getting emotionally manipulated by a bunch of predatory deviants over there at the pod team. There's nothing really you can do about it, And he doesn't know any better. I mean, clearly. The poor guy, he's really touched. But his relationship with God is simple. I don't think that Daniel Mayo is accountable to what he believes. I think Daniel Mayo is in the loving embrace of God because he is in this world with a minimal equipment set, not much he can do with it. And I believe that God is gracious and merciful, and that no matter what Daniel believes, he's fine. I believe Daniel Mayo is covered by basically what we would call in Christianity common grace, which is something everyone has effect of by Christ's work on the cross and God's plan of redemption for mankind. So we all have this access to this common grace. So Daniel, to his capacity, is just fine. His relationship with God is really simple, but I think much more differently. Daniel thinks much more differently. Brett, you think much more differently and deeply. And the capacity of relationship we have will be very different. And it doesn't mean that Daniel Mayo's relationship isn't special to God. And I'm not defeating it or diminishing it. That type of probably childlike innocence and approach to the divine probably has its own point of pleasure and joy to God for his time here on this earth, until I believe that he's, will have his mind and body fully rejuvenated and glorified. And I believe Daniel Mayo, if anyone over there at those Free Grace Deviant team is saved, it's Daniel Mayo. That I would bet on. And everyone else, people like us, we have a certain accountability, and the Bible is clear on this. To whom much is given, much will be required. This is why. God doesn't expect you to take what you've been given and squander it or waste it on selfish ambitions. And I spent a good chunk of my life doing exactly that. All these, whatever talents or skills you guys see me demonstrate in these rooms or in these debates or in these interactions, all of these things that I'm now doing to try and present to the benefit of the glory of the kingdom of God was all used for personal gain. And, constructing and negotiating contracts and closing deals and transferring portfolios and things of this nature. This is what I was using my talents that God gave me for. Nothing for really the glory of his kingdom at all. But now I do. Now I want to take what time I have left on earth with what I've been given, on top of the knowledge and the wisdom that I think I built, to try and sound out, to be a voice of reason, to give people some good arguments and some good justifications for what they believe, to help them make the decision to get onto the right track. And that's why I do what I do. And that's why I now exercise these talents, however intensive or in depth or good you think they are. I had a choice. I'm sure God would have liked me to use these talents similarly along the line as I have earlier. But I didn't. Brett, to take your analogy of the game, I didn't stick to the story. I went and did a whole bunch of side quests and just fucked around, for the better part of, 20 years, all about doing the side quests. Wasn't really sticking to the main story. Now, finally, a little late, but I feel like I'm finally now getting on to the real teleology, the real purpose, the real story, the story that God probably intended. I have a wonderful, beautiful young wife who is excited to have a family with me. I have a channel where I'm equipping a lot of saints with good arguments and good perspectives and encouraging them and enriching them, and even converting some that have thought Christianity was a total crock. And to the glory of God, I do these things, but only now do I feel like I have finally come to a point of genuine synergy with probably what was God's actual will for me to do. So before this point, while God, I'm sure, would have preferred me to use my talents differently, he didn't force me. He let me do it. And now my choice to do so, I think, has a lot more meaning and value than it ever would have been had he forced me to just start doing this in my 20s. So,
well, Smokey, you shouldn't get down on yourself for this. Sometimes when you do all those side quests and you go exploring, it really exercises you mentally and physically and prepares you for the actual war and main story. So it's a good thing.
So,
appreciate the silver lining.
Yeah, just continuing, if you guys don't mind.
Sure.
I was talking about the Alpha and the Omega. The way that I understood that verse is God puts or inserts himself into the set of the first and the last. So if I were to understand that to mean God is the first and he is the last, like, so he is inserting himself in this time frame, or in this set that basically kicks off the time. So if I were to understand that verse as, okay, God is the time, he himself is the time, and he's not really timeless, but he is himself the time. How do you understand that?
He himself is the time?
Based on the first and the last, he's the Alpha and the Omega, for example. He's in the set. he is not outside of the set, but he is within that set, or he is the set, for example, right? So
I think.
Oh,
Go ahead.
so
well, now,
if we were to say time and timelessness are two different sets, so the first and the last would be is indicative of the set that has time, for example, and God is the first, so he's the time. And how do you understand this, to be for God to be himself the time,
I mean,
rather
I
than
could
being
take,
timelessness?
well, that's fine. I could take your position on that, and that's fine. I guess I could use that. Um, I guess if I was taking kind of your language, your approach to it, then I would say it's kind of similar like this. The principle of the Kalam argument, I'm sure you're kind of familiar with, which is kind of just basically the idea of the first mover. Kind of there's an originating source, a first mover that in and of itself cannot be moved in and of itself. There's something independent that sets all things in motion. So when you talk about the first, talk about the first mover, the first thing, and by nature of it being the first mover, it must be exactly that, the first mover. It kind of necessarily entails it's timeless, it's non-causal. So there's no chronology to it. There's nothing it's not contingent upon anything. There's nothing that is supreme over it or that limits it, essentially, other than its own nature, of course. So this is something that kind of necessarily has to be timeless in this regard. If you're talking about the first, or the first of all, the first mover must be unmovable or unmoved. Otherwise, again, you fall into this attaching chronology to God, getting into an infinite regress, and all these other philosophical incoherencies. So,
Mr. Daniel, are you reaching towards a concept of pantheism? I'm just curious.
almost sounded a little like that. Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah.
So I'm thinking to imagine a timelessness, for example, because God always exists. He's the first. So would it be fair to imagine timelessness just doesn't exist?
Well, before there was time, there was timelessness. Now the idea is that's how I look at it. As far as beginning and end, I believe that he's talking about from the moment of construction of the universe and its laws to the end of it. First, last, I started it, I'm going to finish it kind of deal.
I think, well, and the idea to me is that he transcends, the beginning of reality and the end of reality, which he does because he's outside of it, he's beyond it. And again, anything else essentially ends up in some way, shape, or form directly correlating time with God. And there's a lot of problems that emerge once you do that. Once you attribute any time a chronology, especially linear chronology, to God, not only are you removing his timeless characteristic, but now you're putting him into an impossible infinite regress, tied and attached to a physical property of his own creation.
Now, Daniel, you said earlier something really unusual. It was the first time that Smokey needed to take a break and all that. But I had asked the question, do you think that God has beliefs? And you said yes. Can you explain
Yeah,
that a little bit more?
yeah. I mean, the reason why I would think that is to be true is God has invested hopes in His people, and has believed them to meet those expectations. And yeah, that would make me sort of go down this path in thinking God held beliefs. God holds beliefs. So that's where I thought about it, and I said, yeah, that's possible for God to have beliefs. Yeah.
So does that mean God has faith?
Yeah, in people, like he obviously expected some people to perform in certain way and meet expectations, keep his covenant. So he believed, he had faith in those people to abide in the covenant. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's such a simple sounding question, but it's a rabbit hole, ain't it?
Yeah,
What's the rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, I would take the opposite position. I would say it's actually for the Christian God claim, from my view, that to ask if God has beliefs is actually kind of incoherent, because like you only can have a position of belief towards. Hold on one second, sorry. You can only have a position of belief towards something. Freaking cats. You can only have belief towards something you don't know. You can only have faith directed towards something you don't know. And even, well, hold on. Before I go down that road, Daniel, what is your definition of faith? Just so I know, just so I'm not saying something assuming, kind of what your definition is. What
Well,
really is your
I sort
definition?
of treat the word for what it is. Like in language, we developed language, like human beings came up with language, and we have meanings to the words in human, not necessarily from a theological point of view, but we do have meanings for words in day-to-day usage. So we do have faith in things other than God. We do have faith in our relationships, and there's so much more to the word faith than just having faith in the unseen God, for example. So just using the word for what it is in its own semantics, like in its own etymological sense of usage and semantics, there's nothing wrong to say that God did have faith in Israel to perform some duties and be loyal to the covenant. Yeah, I don't see any necessary problem arising there
Well,
around.
you don't think it kind of erases the omniscience component, of God?
No,
Um,
I don't think so.
well, like, okay, so trying to think of a way to. Well, I'm not 100% sure what your definition of faith really is here, but let me just try and play a kind of hypothetical and see if I can kind of round it out here a little bit. How much faith do you need to come to the conclusion that you have a mother? How much faith do you need to come to that conclusion?
I'm almost certain, like there's not even a requirement of
Like
faith, for example.
you're really in a state of knowing. Like you don't really need to jump out on a limb there, to think that, you don't have a mother by all reasonable, because I'm sure you've seen your mother. I'm sure all people that exist have a mother. Like this is just the nature of reality. You have basically the most absolute confidence possible that you have a mother. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
fairly certain that I have a mother. Yeah,
So when you talk to people, I'm sure you never say, "I believe I have a mom." You just say, "Oh, I have a mom and her name is." You
yeah,
don't say, "I believe I have a mom,"
gotcha.
because you have a knowledge claim. You're not
Yep,
operating in faith or belief. You're operating on knowledge. Now,
yep.
that's not, now we can go down a rabbit hole of how that's not really technically true, because we're subjective agents and can only know so much, and based upon our own subjective reasoning, we might be mistaken. It might be a solipsistic universe where we're all in the matrix, just deluded to the idea, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm just saying, in terms of our ability to have confidence in things, you basically have the strongest confidence possible that you have a mother, and that doesn't really need any faith. Like that's not something you put under the category of things you believe. You put that under the category of things you know. So there's a difference. Now, if God is timeless, he's outside of time, he knows all and sees all, and he's omniscient, then there is nothing for him to believe in. There's nothing for him to be questioning about, to put faith in. He's an objective agent. He knows and sees all things. So there's nothing that manifests that he's not fully and completely and absolutely aware of, and all the dynamics therein. So he doesn't need to, as I can see, really have, as you seem to be presenting it, faith in anything. Now we can talk about different versions or definitions of faith. That's fine, and maybe go down that road. But in terms of how I seem like you're presenting it, God as an objective agent, wouldn't be having faith in anything, really, essentially.
Mm,
I mean, I think it's in the book of Job. Yeah, it is. Job 4 and 5, I believe, where it says he does not even put trust in his servants, talking about like the angels, and with his servants he charges with error or sin. So even the free will agents of the heavenly realms are not devoid of free will exercise and possible results therein, just like the evil rulers presented in I believe it's Jeremiah or Isaiah, that are talked about by Jesus later on, that are called the Elohim or gods, but they'll die like men, talking about not only the evil supernatural rulers that are observing and ruling in these places, but also the rulers themselves of the Jewish tribes that were evil and making merchandise of men. So there is this capacity I see all throughout Scripture of the protection of the dynamic of free will pretty much across the board. In fact, the entire story of Job is based around a free will challenge to the one true God in the halls of heaven. So, anyway, I don't know if that was really germane. That was maybe a little off point. Apologies, but I just rambled a
hey,
little bit.
Smokey. Just want to get you back to Alpha and the Omega. It's
Sure. Yeah.
There's ideas popping in my brain. I want to
Yeah.
have
Go
a
ahead.
discussion about that. So, why would it necessarily be inappropriate or philosophically incoherent to identify God as the first, so as the time itself?
Because
And
that means
why?
he had a beginning. Because that means he had a
I mean,
beginning. Like it sounds like you're saying he
the
had a
first the
beginning.
first means you had a beginning. The first means you had a beginning.
Well, that seems to be the way you're putting it. Because if he's
Because
not beyond the first thing, if he's not the first thing, the unmovable first thing, the unmoved mover, if he's not that, that means there's something either beyond him that is moving him, or there's an infinite regress where we don't even get to the creation of a reality.
if we get
Daniel,
out of this, if we
Daniel,
get out of
Daniel, let
space
me ask
time,
you something, and this might bring us around out of this unfortunate loop we found ourselves in. If an entity exists before the physical universe, before space and time, and all things nature-wise, where would the beginning and end be within that concept? Let's subtract the universe, space, and time. So, at what point is God in this? What's happening according to your visual here?
I'm having difficulty in imagining timelessness because
Well, Daniel, if I
the
could real quick, are you picturing it kind of like where it's an infinite set series backwards? Like in terms of timelessness is just God in an endless,
no,
series.
I think I'm feeling I am comfortable with the position that God is the first. And with this statement, I don't necessarily worry about timelessness because timelessness just falls out of the set. It doesn't even belong to the set. So when God is the first, that's where everything has its origins. So from there on, God will abide, and for example, the cosmos will be destroyed, but God will abide. And the space time fabric that we are in can be destroyed, but God will abide. So the time that as we relate to it in our domain of space time fabric can get destroyed, but God will still continue to abide because God was the first and God is the last, so to speak. He will abide, and I cannot perceive a timelessness for God because God is the first. God's been there. There's never been a time when there was no time, no time, timelessness kind of thing. But it's just we as human beings made out of material find ourselves into this time space fabric, and we have this idea of time and chronology, but but to attribute timelessness to God would be something that is not supportive of in the doctrine of God. Like, the doctrine of God communicates that He belongs to the set. He's not outside of the set. He's the first and He's the last, and we are like um, we have come in and relate to this time in our perspective relative to human lifetime. We understand time as a material and space time thing, but God is really the first and the last, and we can't really uh, conflate our idea of timelessness outside of the time and space and project it to God as a post hoc um, rationalizing of timelessness to God, because God Himself does not put Himself outside of the first and the last thing. He's inclusive in the set of the first and
Well,
the
you do
last.
know timelessness is necessarily entailed by spacelessness. Like, it's necessarily entailed. Like, if God has time, then God has space, and God is made of material. Like, it's inseparable. So you are making problems and entailments on multiple angles, and again, you're still kind of seemingly trying to attach some type of chronology to God, which now makes him again subservient to this thing, which is a progression or a chronology. I'm not really sure what type of time you're presenting, whether it's linear or geometric, whether he's able to experience multiple things at the same time or can only experience things in progression. I'm not really sure the model you're defending, so I'm not entirely sure what angle to go at it. But it almost, in some way, seems like you're trying to defend the idea that God is trapped to a sequence or a set in terms of chronology, which now also brings an added problem of him now having to be made of something. Because now he has to have material, he has to have something to him to experience time, because that's how we experience time. And and you did say that in your statement as well, so I know you know that. So there are entailments to this, and you do have the problem, like I said, once you're attributing any type of chronology to God, you bring in a package of problems. That's just one of them.
Yeah, Smokey, if I come off wrong on this, you guys can feel free to correct me on this. But when I hear Alpha, Omega, beginning and end, I feel like it's an analogy for the constraints of the universe as it is, or how its origin and its end. I don't think that God's actually, how do I put this? If He exists within a timeless place outside of nature and all this, then this means He's in some form of dimension or higher plane.
Well, it could be even simpler than that, Brett. If he's beyond the first cause and he's after the last event, we get right to his timeless, spaceless nature right there. If he truly is the first, which means he's beyond any causal first in reality, and if he is indeed the last, transcendental beyond what anything else could persevere or extend to, and he's the absolute extremes of all of these things, then he is beyond all of these things. I think it's pretty simple to me. I mean, even analogously, it seems to be fairly simple to follow, and you still get his primary attributes of spaceless, timeless, all-knowing. Certainly he's going to know everything because he's not tied to time. He's not making probabilistic guesses about the future. He knows everything.
You know how you explained that we're at the end, we basically wrap right back into timelessness. ourselves. So that could kind of be an argument for why it is that we are able to exist in the state that we do with God in the afterlife, or whatever you guys want to call it, because entropy, the law of entropy, no longer exists. You know what entropy is, Daniel?
Yeah.
All right. I'm glad I was able to make some sense. All right, you got any more
I
for
mean,
us?
Daniel, if you could, maybe if you could kind of just take I don't know, a minute or two and like walk me through kind of like how you see your model, like how God kind of, relates to reality, his decisions towards it based upon what he knows, and kind of like, like, do you see him in a progression? Do you see him as having multiple thoughts and feelings at the same time since he sees all? Or like, I mean, do you think he can only have one emotion at one time or something like that? Like, get just, if you could just try and elaborate on kind of your model, like how you kind of see how all this kind of coalesces.
Yeah, okay, I'll try my best. I don't necessarily um, superimpose limitations to God in a way that he has just one unidirectional emotion, um, or feelings or things of that nature. He's beyond my comprehension as to how he or who he is, basically. We, as a human being, possessing the free will that I have received as a gift, for example, um, the way that I would manage my free will is not necessarily how God would function. His will is greater than all, for example. So I would not, I don't claim to be comprehending a lot about how God goes on to do his business, but I can relate to him and I can understand how he functions with us through the words that he communicates to us, for example. So we have these books of God, the Bible and the Quran, and we have so much material in there. So through that material, when I try to read God, God is like this. I cannot attribute to God a timeless dimension of decisions that he has made, some of which could become redundant. And I don't necessarily see God operating at this level of wastage, that he has made n number of decisions and n minus something number of decisions would be redundant. I don't necessarily see God operate in this fashion. I would see God like operate with agents, us human beings, in a much more dynamic way, that he can have an impromptu approach in a dynamic relationship with us human beings. And I don't necessarily see that dynamic relationship as being any hurdle to the philosophical coherence of his omniscience or omnipotence. In fact, I believe if he weren't dynamic, that would be impeding into his omnipotence. That's how I would see it. So I hope you're getting sense of what I'm trying to say to you.
Smokey, are you ready for me to throw something out there based upon the conversation we're having right now? Because it's one of the questions. I think Smokey's pooping or something. He's probably listening in. But the question to go along with what you're talking about there, Daniel, is, does God know every possible future or just the one that happens?
I would not say that. What I would say is God knows, God has determined future, but he has not determined the outcomes, the actual outcomes of the agents of free will, like us, for example. So God has not determined or what I would do, say in the evening, for example, what I would decide in the evening. He has no decisions there. but he becomes knowledgeable once I have made my decisions. You know what I mean?
I hear you. It sounds a little bit like you're going towards compatibilism a little bit.
Compatibilism. So what is compatibilism?
It
Compatibilism,
means
is it to do with?
that means that God basically sets some things in order, and some things are predetermined and set in stone, as where within the framework you're still able to make some choices. Hopefully I articulated that properly.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's, well, whatever. I think I've kind of said kind of everything I need to say on that. What was your question again, Brett? Exactly. I think I probably answered it, but just to kind of make sure I heard it correctly. You're talking about like God's knowing what is going to happen or something, making it necessary. Is that what you asked?
No, this is kind of something that you've scratched on quite a few times when I've heard you. Does God know every possible future or just the one that happens?
Yeah, that's called middle knowledge. That's one of the three categories of knowledge that the Molinists talk about. It's one of the generally easier ones to prove, especially explicitly from Scripture. Necessary knowledge, well, they're all easy to prove, but middle knowledge is easy to prove from Scripture. There's an example of this when the Israelites are asking and crying out to God. They had every intention to want to flee to Egypt, and they were asking God, hey, what will happen if we flee to Egypt? What will happen if we stay here? God communicates very clearly, knowing exactly what would happen if they did one or the other. This is God demonstrating middle knowledge, where he knows the outcome of possible realities based upon what they will choose to do. God's not obligated in any way, shape, or form to instigate that choice or determine that choice, but he does know what the outcomes of either one of the choices are, and he does know which one they will choose. But again, this is knowledge that he's not required to act upon. And again, just when you create the free will agent and you know what it's going to do, it does not mean that you dictated what it's going to do. It doesn't mean that that knowledge is necessarily intrinsically tied to its decision. It just means that you're aware and knowledgeable of what the outcome of the decision is. And this is, I think, at the beginning of the conversation, this was the error that I thought Daniel was kind of making, trying to necessarily tie the knowledge with the sense of now it's in a realm of determinism, that it now somehow negates the action of the free will agent. That's what I was kind of trying to overcome with it. But that's the idea of the category in Molinism of God's middle knowledge. So, and by the way, it completely defeats that stupid idiot theology of open theism, the most uncoherent garbage I've ever heard in my entire life. Because in open theism, God doesn't know what's going to happen. He just operates based upon probabilities and wagers. It's absolute nonsense. Incompetent, dumb, blind, deaf, dumb, idiot God. Yeah. Open theism is ridiculous.
Well, Smokey, I'd like to ask you something outside of my philosophical questions. You had said earlier that you are interested in doing a show based upon the subject matter of atheist. I'm not sure what it is. It probably has something to do with them being dumb. Would you like me to get a show going for you next Friday, or do you want to do it on your channel?
I'll think about it. I'll chew it over tonight, and I'll shoot you an email or something.
All right, sounds good. Daniel, you got any other thoughts, or would you like me to throw out some more questions? And you asked me earlier
No,
about the rabbit hole. What does that mean? You haven't heard the rabbit hole concept before?
I have, but I did not really understand what did you mean by that in
Like
that
Alice in
context.
Wonderland, whenever she goes into the weird world and stuff, and it just takes her all over the damn place. Things go crazy.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Alice in Wonderland, a classic. You ready for a question?
Yeah, sure.
All right. We are now going to actually be on our fourth question after all this time. Here we go. Is God
4. Wow. 2.5 hours. We got to 4. That's great. Yeah.
No, but it's been a fantastic conversation. I'm glad if you guys are interested in stretching it out for other times and all
I
that.
don't care. It's up to Daniel. He's had a long day. Well, I mean, I do too, but it's totally okay.
Cool.
I think we can close with this question, and
No, I
then
mean
we can come
when I
back.
say stretch it out, I mean for other times. Like we can just wait for another day or bring something up every once in a while. It's all good.
I
Here we
don't,
Yeah,
I
sure,
don't mind
sure we can.
having this conversation wherever. In fact, I wouldn't even mind doing a stream on something like the problem of evil or
What I would like to do is I would like to have a different conversation with Smokey before I come back to this, because I want to understand some of the um, entailments of Smokey's philosophy into understanding uh, s- some scriptures. For example, like John 1:1. I would want to know how this all fits in there. Like if Smokey is comfortable talking to me about John 1:1, for example,
sure. I don't care
you know,
anything. Doesn't matter.
yeah,
Pick
we
what
can
you
talk
want.
about it maybe in the next stream.
Whatever. Yeah.
And then I'll be able to correlate how you kind of tie it up all up. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
I can
that's
better
fine.
understand. Yeah, I can better understand your episteme. Yeah.
No, I'm fine with that. Yeah, whatever you want to. Yeah, throw out whatever, and we'll do it. Yeah, I don't care. It's
Yeah,
fine.
not now, but a different stream, for example.
Sure. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good with that.
yeah, yeah.
you said, Smokey, that you have a interest in the evil problem and stuff that a lot of people, I guess, like to bring up. I
I mean,
guess
it's
we
not a
could.
problem for me. I
Oh,
mean,
I
you
understand.
know,
I understand. I guess I could throw this out for you both so you could have some fun with it that you aren't. If God is good, why do bad things like suffering exist?
go ahead, Daniel.
You want to hit it, Daniel?
If God is good, why do suffering exist? So,
It's a
um,
classic atheist question. This is the one that makes them have a sad.
so
It's
there
a
is
problem of
two.
evil question. It is the problem of
Yeah,
evil
yeah,
question.
basically, yeah, that's what it is. So there's two perspectives. One is suffering comes from human volition, human will, and also from God's volition or God's will, because we do have calamities, unprovoked calamities, I would say. For example, even if you take away the evil human, who might get punished by Almighty God through calamities, so take him away. Animals do suffer. So animals are not evil; they won't be burned down in hell, but they do suffer from God's actions on planet Earth, for example. So that if that is a kind of suffering that we are talking about, and you're asking me if God was compassionate and why does he bring suffering into innocent animals? Uh, how would I answer? That would be completely different
This
from
is the general
sufferings that
concept of suffering. Remember that. Everything from pushing a little old lady in front of the bus to kicking a kitten. Go ahead.
So I would necessarily separate the two. I would separate suffering to human beings who are responsible creatures, like we are responsible in the teleology of God to conduct well and to abide by the covenant that God has with us, a failing which God might mount suffering our way through natural calamities. But why would these impact the non-human species is where the debate must be, in my opinion. All right. So if that's what is the question at hand, which the atheists might agree that a benevolent God need not be subjecting non-human or non-sentient species into suffering, I would answer that in this fashion. I might be wrong, but I would answer that in this fashion. Um, that God has made the object of planet Earth and the life on this planet as a lesson for humans to draw upon. So there is an instruction in this organized life to draw out for human beings, so human beings learn their subservientness to Almighty God, their position before the majesty of Almighty God as a servant, and to learn the humility that God is in charge. So there is a lesson that we derive out of it, because God ultimately is the one who awards life and death, and it's easy for God to award life and death. So He gives life, which species become protective of and would want to survive, would want to be safe, and ensure their well-being. But at the same time, God can bring death to them, and this is what God does. And right at this stage, God's is above our questioning, because God does what He does, and God gives life and God gives death. And as creatures, we tend to enjoy the gift of life, and there's a larger instruction out there of death, and how God would award us eternal life if we persevered in His covenant and abided in His covenant. So there is instruction. God organizes this whole suffering on planet Earth as an instruction to human being, so human being can come to God in humble ways as a subservient servant. So that's my take.
Okay. For me, I guess I don't want to take an hour answering this, so I guess I'll just try and boil it down to its lowest common denominator. The allowance of evil is for an ultimate higher good. So there is a higher good that is available than the good that we perceive as the good of limiting or neutralizing evil. There's a higher good than that. And the higher good is protected. So, in terms of the reality that we have, there's certain components of it that basically you could think of would almost be necessary if it was created by a loving God. And one of kind of those necessary components is this dynamic of free will. Because we even understand and recognized in our moral programming that the annexation or violation of someone's will is generally, not always, but generally a moral wrong. And this flows, of course, I believe, from the nature of God Himself and the nature of reality, is that we recognize that it's not loving for us to take our child and chain them in the basement so they never make any dangerous decisions and endanger themselves or make a decision that you don't approve of. We don't see that as loving. We don't recognize that as loving. And there's a reason for that. We don't recognize forced love or grape as something that is love. And this, I think, is a reflection of basically God's nature that is programmed into us of a sense of intrinsic morality. There's some of these core ideas that we kind of just understand basically as a reflection of God and His nature. So to me, when I look at reality, I think about this idea that there is a higher good beyond simply the elimination of evil. I look at the idea of the importance of the free will dynamic, the importance of the relational dynamic with the creation, the necessity for God to really, if He is truly loving, to create a reality where true love is able to actually manifest, not by force or decree or determinism or fatalism, but actually exists. So, and to make an analogy so everyone can kind of get this into perspective of what I'm really saying. If you were to think about reality as a program being created by a programmer, and the program has a specific purpose, just like a calculator has a purpose to calculate numbers and a calendar has the purpose to calculate time. Reality has a purpose. It has a teleology behind its creation. And I believe that this teleology, this highest purpose to it, is to have a meaningful, deep relationship with the creation. I believe all that is must be integrated in a way where it protects this primary purpose, this primary teleology of reality. So there are going to be certain aspects, certain components of that reality that necessarily follow. If the idea is to create a reality where a meaningful, organic, free will relationship can emerge with the creation, then there's going to be certain necessary components of that reality to exist. And this is where we get the idea that the highest good above the mitigation or elimination of evil is the allowance of the manifestation of the free will choice of the creation to choose or to not choose, and therefore have an actual meaningful relationship with the divine. And those that choose the otherwise are basically just the ones that are part of the equation, that will, if they choose to exercise their free will, they will emerge and deviate to the other side. But it does not negate the value or eliminate or present any lack of justification for the allowance of the manifestation of those who want to have that true, loving, genuine relationship with God. I am one of those that take the position, and this is even something that could be discussed a little more in depth later, that I actually believe that we live in the, and I'm going to be real careful with my language here, don't take a deterministic spin off of what I'm about to say. We live in the minimal scope of possible evil worlds. And what I mean by that, just to give an example, and I would defend this if anyone wants to challenge me on this, we look at all the evils in the world and we think to ourselves, based upon our limited perspective, this is as bad as it could possibly get. That's completely not true. As an example, imagine if suddenly we had people like the X-Men or telepaths or psychics or things like that, people that could make people see things, hallucinate things, control people, crack through concrete, could fly. Imagine all the incredible extra scopes of evil mankind would be capable of if we had these extra ranges and scopes in our nature. So I hold the position that God, I believe, created basically the reality in scope and range, not determinism by choice, but in scope and range of the choice and nature of his created agents, to provide for what I think was the most minimally possible universe, most minimal possible amount of evil to emerge while still protecting the free will dynamic. That I do believe.
Oh, okay.
Very articulate. I myself, as you know, Smokey, I had a issue with the evil problem and all that for a while there.
I recall, Brett. I recall.
I talked to somebody and everything, and luckily they were very patient with me, and they said, I go, why would God create, evil and suffering and all this kind of stuff? And he goes, well, if you read the Bible, Brett, he didn't originally do it that way. These people were perfect. They were good. They had everything going for them, and they were given a decision and were told clearly and specifically what was going to happen. And then suddenly I started feeling like my position was falling to shit. And I was like, oh man. So that's what helped me change some of my views, and it really helped me through my problem.
Well, good. Awesome. Praise God. That's great. Good. All right. Well, that's about I guess all I had on that topic. I don't know if we're going to wrap it up now, or it was a good talk.
It's totally up to you guys. You've seen my page probably. It's like 50 questions, and we're only like on 4.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm
it's
in
up to you,
favor of
Daniel.
wrapping it up.
Yeah.
No, I'm in favor of wrapping it up. So
Sure. I'm good with
yeah,
that.
let's
Yeah,
wrap
we can
it up.
always,
And
we can always come back and pick this up again. Let the questions take on a slightly different role or something. I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure. I'll go back and re-listen to your kind of take on that about the stance of evil or something. But in any case, I think I certainly got out what I wanted to say on a lot of these subjects, I think, and I really appreciate you coming along and presenting kind of the other side and the viewpoint, and it kind of even, I think, stimulated me getting some of these things out. And I think this was a really good time. I actually really, really enjoyed it. I thought this was great, really fruitful. So
yeah, same here. I mean, it's very interesting to learn from where you're coming and all of the other interfaith within Christianity. I mean, you seem to have a plethora of understanding of all of these different branches of how they relate to these philosophical ideas. So it's good to know. It's good to know and learn from you. And yeah,
appreciate it, man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going to be a relationship of learning, I suppose. At least for me.
Sure.
So yeah.
Well,
Looking forward
I'm
to it.
interested to learn your take too. And even on some of these things, especially the Quran only stuff, and I'm curious on some of these other things. So, because I know, here's the thing: I see you've kind of come to, we're all responsible for our own epistemology and what we choose to believe. I tend
Yeah.
to get real cautious about wandering too far from the lines of Christian orthodoxy unless I have a really good reason to. And the reason is because I don't want to take a position where I'm trying to like elevate my understanding or grasp of knowledge suddenly higher than the entire collective effort of like the theological world. You know, like to me, it would be a little ridiculous, even on its face, to like adopt, say, for instance, Arianism, you know, or like Jehovah's Witness theology, where Jesus is a created being and not actually God, because in 325 AD, pretty much the entirety of the theological world came together to refute three heretical, you know, priests or bishops, Arius and his two supporters, and the entire theological world, 300 plus, you know, bishops and theological leaders came from all over the world to show up and contend and debate and say Arianism is bullshit. Now, for me to look at that story and think that I'm somehow supposed to place a bet on the loser, you know, the people that propagandized their heresy to the leaders to basically make it some sort of overarching forced, you know, narrative. And even to this day, I have degenerate little idiot atheists running around claiming that Arianism was some super huge, massive, wide reaching theology simply because certain propagandists spread it to certain rulers who adopted it in their regions, you know, and to the idea that someone's going to look back in church history and say, I'm going to side with these three nut jobs that were basically ostracized, you know, not excommunicated. I mean, Arius stayed a priest until the day he died, but he was kind of isolated and he didn't really have any teaching position or any respect in the church. And for someone to come along and say, oh no, that guy had it right. You know, the guy that lost to all arguments everywhere and was completely clowned across the entire theological world and couldn't get really anyone to agree with him other than two radical people, you know, that were under his study. You know, you got to look at things like that. I think the Christian has to look at that stuff with a sense of intrinsic scrutiny. And you really
Yep.
want to, you know, to think the idea that the entire theological world that came together to write the Nicene Creed was simply devoid of the Holy Spirit, that you were able to get 300 plus minds to come together and completely agree on the verbiage of, with all these different prepackaged ideas and presuppositions and interpretations and stuff, and they can all come together and refute this heretic with the Nicene Creed that delineates the nature of the Trinity, you know, and it's basically as analogously or close as it possibly can. I mean, the Bible proves that the Trinity is personhood via the Granville Sharp rule. It's pre-programmed in the Greek. Matthew, is it 20? It's 28 or something. I have to go look it up. Go baptize in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Go look up what the Granville Sharp rule is. Very specifically in the Greek, this is communicating personhood in the text. So it's there. Anyone, you know, Jesus said, he who has, you know, ears to hear, let him hear. You know, it's all there for anyone that wants to see it and look at it. But we adopt things based upon what we like and what feels good. And I am trying real hard to not be one of them. Real hard. In
Yeah.
fact, those people tend to irritate me. And God forbid I be one of them. I want to adopt what's true.
Yeah, I hear you.
I
hear you.
guess I can wrap things up with one last thing for you both. It won't be a philosophical thing about God's nature, but it'll be more about the nature of atheist. Would you guys be interested in that real quick?
Can
And
you
then
can you
we'll
just
finish.
hold on, Brett? I'll just have to say a
Sure,
word
sure.
to yeah. So, Smokey, I would be interested to if you could think about what I said of the redundancy problem that comes with timeless decisions of Almighty God, and would that impede on Him being a perfect God? I would want you to think about this, and in the next stream, probably talk about it a little bit, right?
That's fine. I don't really
Okay.
see a redundancy problem. And I don't even really see how it's redundant at all, because the choice is based upon whatever actualizes. So his choice only actualizes based upon what actualizes in reality. So I don't see any redundancy by him having an operational knowledge of what he would do in any possible reality. I don't see any redundancy problem, because it's not like, I'm not talking about some multiverse concept where there's multiple universes where he's making all these decisions at the same time in different timelines. That's not, there's no redundancy in that regard. It's just he has already decided what he will do based upon any decision of any free will agent. And it doesn't mean that he dictated what the free will agent to do to make those decisions.
Right. It would probably, just as you suggest to Smokey to think about that, you might want to try to think of another way to articulate this, because I think you're trying to make a point, but it keeps on, sadly, it keeps on being said over and over like a repeat at this point, so that both of you might, want to work on that.
Well, maybe I don't even know what really mean by like redundancy. Like, because it's not like it's not like he's making decisions that are all going to actualize. Like when we make a decision, towards something, aside from a mental process, a decision that follows action, like we're doing something, that's what actualizes. Like, and we know we had that decision to go one path or the other. And that knowledge hasn't somehow dictated which one I've chosen to do. Like it's just, I'm just not understanding like this connection. Like I'm just not, it just all seems kind of red herring a little bit to me in terms of, connecting God's relationship with reality. Like knowing what's going to happen doesn't mean you made it happen. Like, I could know there's a tornado in Kansas tomorrow. It doesn't mean I made it happen. You know what I mean?
But
Like,
because
when
there's
I
still
hear your word, Daniel, of redundancy, I imagine a programmer hitting his keys and then eventually just holds down one of the buttons and just lets it redundantly go on and on and on and on forever. So I'm not exactly sure where you're getting at on that either. But if you guys are wanting to wrap it up, I do have the final thing for you if you're getting tired.
it's fine. We can wrap up. It's okay. I wanted to spend a little time with the missus anyway. So
what do you guys think?
Yeah.
Next Friday, 7 p.m. like this, get into some more topics.
Friday, maybe an hour later, Brett. Give me a little more time on Friday, like 6 your time would probably be fine.
Okay, you want me to go 6 Central, huh?
What did you set it for? What did you set it for this last time? What did you set it for on your time zone?
7 p.m. Central.
Okay, if you could set it for 8 your time, set it for 8 your time. I would be fine with that.
Not to be a bitchy little girl, but remember, I did ask you what was the best time for you. That's why I do it.
That was, and this was fine. I didn't have an issue with this either. So and Friday's fine. I don't have an issue with Friday. That's fine. 6 o'clock for me would be best, and that's Pacific Standard Time. Sounds like you're 8 o'clock, so that would be fine for me. I have no problem with that.
I'm going to show you guys a small collection of statistics that I have discovered. Some of these I have already discovered quite a while back, but it still seems to hold today. Here we go. I'm going to put it on the screen, and I'd like you guys' opinion on it. You guys can be heard. The thing has muted yet.
Yeah, no, I was reading it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you adopt a worldview that is pure relative subjectivism, that you can write your own meaning, value, teleology, moral set, it really does allow open license to every vice and depravity known to man under the sun, basically doing whatever's right in your own eyes. So I'm not surprised by this, considering, from my viewpoint, the propensity of the human to want to gravitate towards fleshly satiation without the sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit, this is what I would expect to see. Those that abandon any attempt of servitude or link to the Spirit will be slaves to the flesh. So, yeah.
Would
I'm
you
not
guys prefer I
surprised.
keep it up on the screen while you guys are talking, or what do you want me to do?
I think you just showed the product of general subjective moral relativism. I think that is essentially what it pretty much always filters down into. The worst of human vices and appetites is what will filter out into the mix and be licensed. After all, what good does an atheist have to present that someone should stop doing drugs? Look at Wildheart. Wildheart's an atheist with a whole bunch of atheist friends. Oddly enough, not a single one of them have been able to convince him to stop drinking himself to death. I wonder why that is. Because they don't have an argument. They don't have a justification. Every atheist is responsible to their own sense of value. And the only thing that they possibly have to argue with at any point in time is if you're harming someone else. But even that becomes a gray area as to what is actually harming and what is actually is enough harm to invalidate someone's expression of free will. And everyone has a different idea of that as well. So that's all subjective and relative as well. And there is no justification to tell someone to not just completely end themselves in their own way possible, because they're allowed to create their own moral set, their own set of values as to what they prioritize, and who, from another subjective opinion-based set, is ever going to be able to argue to the contrary. What is the highest and best good for you might not be the highest and best good for the drug dealer on the corner, and you're kind of approaching it with a sense of arrogance, saying otherwise if you have nothing to operate from than your own subjective relativistic viewpoint. So, yeah, atheism's a mess, and it has no mechanism inside it to help itself improve. None at all. Just a black hole, just a meaningless cluster of nothingness, denialism, and nihilism.
What do you think, Daniel?
Some of my good friends are atheists here in town, and I do see atheists to be genuinely agnostic, meaning not knowing kind of premise, but they would assert outwardly in opposition to religious people as being atheistic. But internally, when I've had a pretty involved discussions, I've found out that they are inherently agnostic. Not knowing is their premise, but in opposition to people of religion, they would take an extreme uh, view of opposing them, and so they would go on to declare atheism. And my personal experience has been that atheists, I mean, there's bad apples everywhere. There's people of religion are bad too, but there's also good individuals among atheists, and I just cannot. Not that I would end up disappointing my friends who are atheists, but I genuinely feel there's good people among atheists, and some of them are far better people than some of the bad people in religion. So it's basically people's relative understanding of ethics, morality, which can still function in a pretty decent way, not necessarily linked to God. I'm not of the premise that a man has to be obedient to God in order to be a good person on earth in his life. I think a human being can be a very good person even not knowing God, because the volition of doing good and bad is inherent within human being, and it's basically the choices that human makes from this from the internal mechanism of guidance that God has made a part of human software. I would say human conscience. So the conscience that human has received as a faculty from Almighty God operates independently of Almighty God, and humans can end up doing good and bad. All sorts of people do good and bad. People of religion do a great amount of sin and harm to other people, but there's atheists who also can do a lot of good to people. So all of these possibilities exist, and
Right.
this is the design of God, the teleology of God. But I would agree with the premise that God lays out Himself, which is to do good is to basically start acknowledging the truth. So if an atheist is in denial, and if he goes on to assert atheism is the right, atheism has evidence, or atheism is the right way for human beings, then that would necessarily require evidence out of him, because if there's a position of assertion that atheism is the right way of the worldview, then they would require to shoulder the burden of proof to uh, to substantiate the position of why atheism would be that uh, would be the default position of the world, of human beings. I think that's when the bad enters an atheist. As far as atheist would go, an atheist would go like, I don't know. That would still be a closer position to being just, not entirely just, but closer to being just, rather than asserting that there is no God. So, but as far as ethics goes, I think atheists can really functionally be good people, and people of religion, no matter what religion, can functionally be really evil people at the same time. So their faith would necessarily be void, but they themselves would be believing, but their, according to God's judgment, their faith would still be void. But yeah, all these possibilities exist in human uh, spectrum, because humans understand things slightly differently. Not we are not a homogeneous body having a homogeneous group having homogeneous set of beliefs and ideas. So we are all little different in a way. So that's just my opinion.
Mm, I can understand that, and I actually don't doubt your claim on that an assertion, even though I have a very negative outlook of atheists. I believe that if atheists are standing in the proximity of Smokey or myself, they'll be the nicest cupcakes you ever meet. But get them behind a computer where they don't think they're accountable for their actions and behaviors, just as they don't believe there's a God, you start seeing the cracks. You start seeing something, kind of some decay there. You know what I mean?
I don't think I like the idea that people that are able to do good things are good people. I don't, and I don't like the idea that someone would possibly be defined by maybe the worst thing they did in their life. Like the idea that, someone when they were in their 20s was part of a gang and they killed someone, and then they paid their time and they got out and they spent the rest of their life speaking against being in gangs, using their story as a testimony. I don't think they should somehow be condemned and defined by that one thing they did that led them down the path that ultimately led to highest and greater good. So I guess I'm not, Daniel, I don't agree. And I don't think I really understand necessarily even the premise, because I don't think that really anyone's good if we're talking about the standard of God. But in terms of good in the sense of someone sanctified, yeah, I mean, an atheist would never qualify, and an atheist generally cannot escape having any justification. Every justification he has generally has to have something of self-service, selfishness tied behind it, because there's really no intrinsic motivation ultimately to do anything for someone else. So, like, even in the instance, and this is where I think this is why I have a problem with what you're presenting, because you present it like all the goodness is just in the action. That the motivation, the spirit behind it, or the heart of it really doesn't have any power. And that's certainly not how Christianity works. Only deeds done in faith are good deeds. And to give you an example, Abraham sacrificing Isaac, or going up to sacrifice Isaac, if God hadn't told him to do that, and he just took his son up on the mountain to scare the crap out of him, or something, that wouldn't have been a good thing to do. But because he was following the command of God, it was a good thing to do. Well, what's the difference? It's the same action. Well, one's done in faith and one isn't. So an atheist in a soup kitchen, handing out soup to the homeless, might be doing that for a purely selfish motivation. In fact, it's hard to believe that they'd construct anything other than that, because they want to be perceived as a good person with their friends, or, oh, look what I do. or they just want to feel good about themselves, that they're a good person, that they're better than their friends, or something of the like, because the motivation can't be in the spirit as to some sort of service to the holy God, of a sense of self-sacrifice and worship to the one who saved and offers salvation. It can't be anything like that. So it can't be any pleasing in its core. See, like the goodness of the world, the goodness of reality is more than just the actions themselves. A broken clock can be right twice a day. A horrible person is capable of doing good things from time to time. You could interact with one of your atheist friends, and he's the nicest guy in the world, and you guys have a great time together, and you enjoy your camaraderie ship, and you get every impression that he's a moral, good person, and he volunteers, and he helps people, at the soup kitchen, and he does all this volunteer work and stuff. And he also beats the living Christ out of his wife every Wednesday when he gets drunk. Is he a good person because he did some good things? This is not how we judge morality or goodness. If we look at someone who went out and founded 10,000 orphanages and saved 1 million kids from being homeless and impoverished and starved, we don't look at the one that he picked up and kidnapped and brutally raped and murdered and say, oh, let that one go because he helped so many of the others. This is not how we judge morality. This is not how we judge goodness. And the goodness of a person, the person that makes them good, to me, is their commitment to Christ. And in that commitment to Christ are going to be the things that necessarily follow, which is good, because Christ taught us to be self-sacrificing, benevolent, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. The golden rule, the commanding of humility, benevolence, kindness, generosity, goodwill, good faith towards men. All of these things that ultimately, if they were practiced, would make the world a much better place. But people don't follow the teachings of Christ. And if a Christian claims to be a Christian and they're not following the teachings of Christ, they're not a Christian. Christian is defined as someone who follows the teachings of Christ. That's what it means. It's definitional. If they're not doing it, then they're not a Christian. And it doesn't matter if they claim. If I claim to be Scottish, but I'm not from Scotland, and I don't know what haggis is, guess what? I'm a fucking liar. And a Christian who claims to be a Christian and doesn't follow the teachings of Christ is a fucking liar.
Daniel, I understand that you said that you've taken a break and you've been away from YouTube for a while. I think that I think that I don't even have to put any effort into convincing you whatsoever how cruel some of these non-believers can be. I think I'll just give it some time, and after you have a few of them pull their pecker out on your camera or your screen and ruin your shows and call you the N-word.
Yeah, they'll do that. Yeah.
Then I think that you'll be more understanding of where me and Smoke is coming from. I know it's hard. I used to have this glory image of people too, where it's like, I think everybody's got some good in them and all that. And I used to even be bothered by the concept of hell. Now I can imagine and be just fine with it that some people are going to lose their soul and simply be non-existent. Yeah, it's just the experience. You get there.
Well, I had a great time.
You guys have a wonderful day.
Awesome. This was so much fun. I had a really great time. I'm glad you set this up, Brett. This was really good. And yeah, I'm happy to do it again sometime. This was awesome.
Yeah, Brett. Let us know when you will sort of set it up.
Well, this
and
kind
we'll go
of
from
really
there.
depends on you guys. I used to just open my rooms to everybody and all that kind of stuff, but I select a few. I've got my favorites. Smokey's one of them, and I'm really, really digging you as well there, Daniel. I like being able to have these deep conversations. I don't like sitting in rooms where people are just all day. I like to actually learn things as well as be able to participate in a conversation.
I enjoy this. I really enjoyed talking to Smokey today with you, and this is fantastic. This is mutual learning, and we are not focusing on preaching so much. It's learning is what we are focused on. So it's pretty good.
So what do you guys say I start something at 6 p.m. Central? I'll have it scheduled for Friday. Sound good?
That's fine. Yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
If I see either one of you going live and you've got an interesting topic and, the wife isn't wanting to use me for something, I'll be more than happy to jump into you guys' shows. I won't go into detail.
Sure.
Cool.
So do send me an email about this, like when you're setting up the stream next. So I kind of keep that in my mind about the time and everything. So thank you, Smokey, and thank you, Brett. God bless you both. Yeah.
Awesome.
Daniel,
Take care, man.
remember,
Absolutely.
guy, remember. Oh, sorry. Daniel, remember, people, if you go to people's YouTube channel and click on their live section, and I always schedule things way in advance, so you'll always see the notification
Sure.
for that.
Okay.
Cool.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Thank
It was
you.
a fun time. Appreciate it, Daniel. Thank you for being here.
All right. God bless you all.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess Ray.
God TV Radio, the Brett Keane Show. Come join the relevance, anything intelligent.